I call this meeting of the Conroe Independent School District Board of Trustees to order. Let the record show that a quorum of members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The time is 6:02. Leading us in the invocation tonight will be Trustee Dungan, and our Pledge of Allegiance will be Trustee May.
Please stand with me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight thankful for your provision, Lord, thankful for all that you're doing in this district, Lord, to cover our students, Lord, our administrators, our teachers, Lord, and all of our staff. We ask your continued blessings on this board, Lord, as you guide us, Lord. Guard our decisions, Lord. Allow us to gain knowledge and wisdom, Lord, as we move forward with the things of this district that will benefit our students and our teachers, Lord. Just allow us to remain focused on the classroom. Lord, we just ask that you guide and guard our students, Lord, as they perform every day. Keep them safe in our hallways and in our classrooms. We thank you again. We love you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texas pledge.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you both. Okay, since we have no citizens' participation this evening, we will move on to our only action item of the night, item 3A, consider and possibly take action regarding map testing for the district.
Okay. Well, as our team is making their way up here, I just wanted to kind of recap where we are on this. This is a topic that we discussed a few weeks ago and had great conversation during the board meeting. Coming out of that meeting, I know that we had some more questions to answer. I thank you. We've had great dialogue back and forth, a lot of questions and answers and data sent back and forth to you over these last 2 weeks. This is the team that does all that work behind the scenes, and because we have had, quite a bit of conversation 2 weeks ago and quite a bit back and forth, what I've really asked our team tonight is we've limited them to just 4 slides because I didn't want to belabor the point tonight, but obviously we're here to answer any questions you may have as well, but we'll love for them to introduce themselves and then we'll share some new information.
All right. Good evening, President Odenweiler, members of the board, Dr. Null. We've met most of us before. My name is Wendy Tisdale. I'm the coordinator of assessment and instructional materials. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit more about assessment.
Good evening, I'm Darren Carlisle. I'm Director of Curriculum Instruction. I don't know if this is working.
There.
It's not staying. Oh, there it goes. It's the user. I'm Darren Carlisle, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Learning.
I'm Lauren Helfer, the Coordinator of Accountability, Data Analysis, and Performance Reporting.
Hi, Melinda Stewart, Director of School Improvement.
Good evening, Terrell Jackson, Teacher Incentive Allotment Coordinator.
So we do just have a brief overview. We were asked to bring some information about types of assessment, and that is what we have for you this evening. So I want to make sure I say that these are not all my words. It just so happened that we were deep in the documents related to the Bluebonnet curriculum, and the Bluebonnet keys to success for assessment actually align with the types of assessment we have in our program here in Conroe ISD. So that these words come from the TEA assessment keys to success. There are 3 kinds of assessment. There are curriculum embedded assessments, such as our quarterly assessments. These could be either formative or summative. They're always aligned to the instructional material. They provide insight for teachers to respond to individual student needs. They usually assess only current standards or spiral review. Then there are interim or benchmark assessments, such as MAP. These will show the degree that students are on pace to meet end-of-year standards. They're aligned to the standards, holistic, and cover materials across units. These are the assessments that are easy to aggregate and analyze. And in the case of MAP, they are diagnostic and adaptive in nature. And then, of course, the STAR summative, which is used for accountability, evaluation of schools, or to measure overall student learning outcomes.
All right, so my turn. I get to talk to you a little bit about curriculum embedded assessments. Within those, we have our quarterly assessments, And their purpose, well, first of all, we give them within the last 2 weeks of a grading period. For elementary intermediate, we give them quarter 1, 2, 3. Quarter 4, because we do STAR, we use the STAR assessment TEKs that are assessed through our curriculum quarter 4, so that we're not double dipping and giving the kids 2 assessments that serve the same purpose. So that's why there's only 3 at the elementary intermediate level. They also assess content that's been previously taught as defined by our curriculum maps. They're designed to be completed in one single block of instructional time. So usually at secondary, it's about a 45-minute, 50-minute period, and at elementary, it fluctuates, but by and large, about 50 minutes is what we average across the grade levels. That's what they're designed for. They're provided to teachers before the beginning of the quarter so that they know what's going to be on the test, so that that drives their instructional practice and it helps them to plan with the end in mind. And finally, they are adjusted annually based on feedback. This is our first year to have quarterly assessments, so we're in that process right now to collect and gather data from the campuses, from teachers, from administrators, so that we can make those adjustments moving into next year. And then under curriculum embedded assessments, you will also find, now with our new Bluebonnet curriculum, you're going to find the unit assessments, or our UAs. And those would be in the grade levels that are going to be implementing Bluebonnet learning. There's one at the end of every unit, and the various grades fluctuate. Some grades have 6 units total, some grades have 10 units total. So at the end of every unit, there is a summative unit test.
So MAP is a kind of interim or benchmark assessment. As I've said, it's a dynamic, adaptive assessment. It will measure both achievement and growth over time. It will predict STAR performance, but it also will predict ACT or SAT performance starting at 2nd grade. In fact, they can start to predict over time how a student would perform on SAT or ACT in high school. It does identify an individual student strengths and weaknesses so that we can gain precise insights to make critical decisions and personalize our instruction. It also gives us data for performance and growth at the student, class, school, and district level so that we can identify trends, spot potential problems, and plan for improvement. So we have talked about this before, but just to remind us, these are the assessments that MAP testing will replace in the different grade levels and contents. And with that, we would like to request your approval.
Okay, so moving forward, I'd like to give everyone an opportunity, if you have a question, to ask your question. If you have something you need to say, share it, but then we'll move on, okay? Anyone?
We'll just go down the line.
There you go.
First, I want to say thank you very much for digging deep and coming back to us again. I'm very grateful for your work the first time, and even more grateful for your work that you did this time as well. I'm just curious, I asked Wendy this not too long ago, did you have any aha moments that came out of the polling that you did, or the survey?
Sure, for me the big aha was that we need to make sure that everyone understands the purpose. Purpose for doing things is very important, and if people understand the purpose, then a lot of times they can get on board even if they're not on board. So what I noticed was that not everyone understood the purpose, and that was one key takeaway for me.
I would have to say the same for me. It came to fruition before I had the survey results, just because I do spend a lot of time on campuses, and I like to talk to teachers and find out what they think. And I would always come back to Wendy and say, Wendy, people are just not, our teachers out there don't understand the purpose of the different assessments, because when I sit with them and I say, this assessment helps you build this type of small group, and remember, we also have this type of small group, so this assessment will help you with that. It makes sense to them, but there's one of me and thousands of them, so getting that information, and that's where we've been working behind the scenes, is how do we get that information out to everyone? So we have some ideas as to how we can do that moving forward into next year. But I would say it really falls back on that, really making sure that not just our teachers, but also our administrators really understand the purpose of the various assessments that we give, because they all do have a very distinct purpose.
I have one more question too. Can you remind us one more time how much instructional time you saved with the MAP testing?
So for reading in elementary, we've been told 21 instructional days. For math, we've done some basic calculations, given what we were told about the number of minutes it takes to do small groups of 4 to 5 students. It turns out to be about 14 to 15 instructional days at elementary.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
I don't have any questions. We've talked about this quite a bit. I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing, what these diagnostic tests will achieve. So I'm excited about it.
Again, thank you very much for putting this together. I have talked to a few teachers since our last meeting, and I was in support of this the last meeting. I have just a quick question. So, first of all, for the folks that are listening, I don't think were the survey results posted in this? Did you want to share what the survey results were? Just for those that are listening.
The teacher survey.
What were the general takeaways
general.
from the survey?
Oh, the general takeaway was that there were positive feedback and negative feedback. What I have surmised, yes, they wanted to do one or the other.
Yes.
So the campuses that piloted had to do both MAP and they wanted to do the BAS testing.
Okay.
And so then that's why I say purpose is important here, and the communication of purpose. Because some of the comments were, they said this would save time, but we had to do both.
Got it.
Well, you're only doing both because this was a pilot.
That was never the intent.
That's never been the intention over time.
And you did mention that.
Yes.
And then just briefly, another teacher that I spoke with mentioned, well, what do you do with the results? And so could you share a little bit about that as well?
Sure. So at the district level, one of the things we've already been doing is talking about how teachers can use these results. And when we met with teachers after each of BOY and MOY, we looked at the reports they can get. There were a lot of ahas in the room for, oh my goodness, I can see where all of my students are falling at a glance. I can also look at individual students and see what their skills, strengths, and weaknesses are, what they're ready to do next, which is very powerful. We don't have another assessment where you can see what students are ready to do next.
Got it.
So that growth there is going to be a key component for us, that we look at how we push all students. The temptation in education is to teach towards the middle. And that's why sometimes we see students that are already strong not grow. MAP gives us the ability to know how we grow our top level students as well as our bottom level students.
Well, it sounds like a great tool. I mean, it sounds like it replaces tests, so we're not doing extra tests. They're getting 21 and then additional 10 days back. We're not paying anything additional because it's covered under the allotment. And I mean, listen, we do hard things, and this is something that is worth the outcome. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Go ahead. Okay. First, I want to thank y'all, the team right here that's sitting in front of us, for coming back and answering questions that we may have. I appreciate the work you've done. Dr. Medford, I appreciate you providing extra data for us. The middle of year data that you provided was very helpful from the pilot studies. That was something that we hadn't seen, and I appreciate the extra effort on your part because I know you've done a lot of work on this, so thank you. Also want to give a shout out, because she's in the crowd, to my favorite principal, because I'm partial, Dr. LaTori Jacobs. She was quick to pull me aside and offer an explanation to me about the things that I wasn't understanding and the benefits of MAP and how much time that's going to give our teachers at San Jacinto, at least, for sure, are excited about the time they're going to be getting back for classroom instruction. So, Dr. Jacobs, thank you. Thank you for your passion and your support of your teachers, because I think that they need to know that not only at that school, but all of our principals are going to be on board with this and support the teachers. So I really appreciate that. Thank y'all.
Hi, thank y'all so much for your presentation. I'm still kind of trying to put together why, if MAP can kind of give us an idea of where individual students can grow and even show us trends on campuses, why we would continue to give the QA instead of using our curriculum to help with where the growth needs are.
Right, so we talked about the purpose, and so QAs have a little bit different purpose. So that some of the TEKs are assessed via MAP, but not necessarily in the sequence and the alignment that we do it in our district. And so the QAs give us at the district data a lot of information as to is our written curriculum aligned to our teaching, right? And maybe there's a skill that is very foundational in nature that we haven't paced out correctly in our scope and sequence that we need to give more time to teaching or less time to. So we look at the data to help us beef up our curriculum, which ultimately helps our teachers teach the curriculum better and improves student achievement.
I also want to say thank you for coming back with this data. I think it was really good to see the difference between the boy and the MOI. Just seeing the growth that happened in that time. And then the teacher surveys were reflective of what I had previously heard. So I do like the plan to try to address some of those concerns. I'm also still a little bit concerned about having the quarterly assessments and doing so much district testing to take away from individual testing. A concern I have with the QA is the pacing element, and then the fact that it's district-wide across a diverse student body. In some ways, and tell me if I'm understanding it wrong, it seems as if we're giving the star for a grade. You're naturally going to have some students that would perform poorly on a star, some students that would perform better, but when we're looking at TEKs, we're looking at curriculum. It seems that that's kind of what the QA would do, and I'm being told that it's now being required for final exams. Is that right?
So at the secondary level, we had the question when we were creating the QAs, whether they had to give a final and a QA. And of course, I think we would all agree that we don't want lots of testing, particularly when it's the same purpose. And so the final and a QA essentially are a criterion reference test. They're the same purpose. We're getting information on whether the skills that we taught our students have been mastered. So what we offered is use the fourth QA as your final exam. And in some cases, it was brought up that they felt that the QA was not long enough for a final, so we offered to leave it open for teachers to be able to add additional questions, but again, did not want our teachers to administer a final and a QA. So for grades 7 through 12, if there is a QA given in that course, QA4 is to serve as the final exam, and they can make adjustments to it to make it longer if they'd like, but they don't give both because
it's required as a grade though.
We do require it at the end.
I'm just concerned that some teachers might have to reteach. They might be in a different spot, so their kids are going to perform poorly on the QA versus the MAP. It seems that you can really reach students where they are and help them grow, whereas the QA, when we're looking at the STAR, a lot of times we're also looking at growth, but to me this would just be grading a kid on performance only.
Right, so another purpose of the quarterly that I didn't mention previously, and it's another reason why we wanted QA4, is we also have courses that are not STAR tested, but that allow our students to really practice for the TSI and the pre-SAT and SAT. And so that QA4 really gives our campuses and those courses lots of information on how students are performing and what we can do to help them practice and prepare for those assessments as well.
Some of our students still, does everybody have to take that final, or do we have some kids that are exempt from the final?
Usually we do have exemptions, and they're able to exempt the QA if they're eligible for a final exemption. That's in our guidance documents that they're able to exempt that final QA as well. And we've had some discussions with campuses who want, because of the TSI data that they get and the pre-SAT, who want the data but also want to honor the kids being exempt from that. So one of the options that they'll do is that they will give the assessment, but they'll give it a lot earlier. They won't give it in that window, just so that they are able to provide that data to the students and help them work towards their TSI, PSAT, and SAT goals.
I also want to say thank you. And one of my little rock stars over here that I just love for TIA stuff, I'm so excited you're here because this was one of the things that I had already talked with Dr. Null about. The positives I've heard about the map, again, thank you for the data, because that was the one thing we were wanting back in the last vote. And, but yet we didn't want it to delay us being able to do this as well. So it was like, how fast can we do this? So thank you. We appreciate that. But TIA, the one thing I'm hearing is that, well, do we have a TIA plan for ramping up more on TIA? Yes, is what I hear. The second thing that I heard was we're going to be able to scale district-wide a lot better by using the map testing. And that means even our non-star grades are going to be able to be participating in TIA, correct?
So currently, for our expansion plan for 2025, 2026, we have taken our current eligible 26 TIA Phase 2 campuses and allowed them to be expanded to all 6 of our categories in the application for TEA. So that's going to add an additional 280 additional assignments to be able to be eligible for 25-26. We've also looked at expanding our current campuses that have greater than 35% ECODIS, and that's going to bring an additional 280 additional teaching assignments. And for our retention and recruitment purposes for our special education, for those hard to fill positions, Life Skills Rise and STC, that is going to bring in an additional 90 additional TIA assignments. So overall, currently we have 869 eligible TIA assignments at 26 TIA campuses. With the new expansion plan that we would like to bring in, hopefully with the map as well, which will help increase those assignments, we will add an additional up to 630 eligible TIA teachers for next school year.
For a grand total of?
That is, I want to say
approximately?
about 1,700 students.
And there's
1,700 teachers.
Around 4,000 teachers?
Teachers, correct.
So we're almost getting to half at this point, but and then we can go further, hopefully.
Yes,
after this.
absolutely.
So, I mean, and each time we add, we're having to make sure we're covering so we don't not get
correct.
our TIA
And so,
money.
yes, absolutely. So the way that we have phased in since we began our first data capture school year in 21-22, we wanted to ensure that all of the campuses and the assignments that we brought in were all going to provide a positive correlation for our data validation, which is our result from TEA to be able to approve all of these teachers. So what we've been doing for the past 3 going into 4 years has been working. This year now we have 384 teachers that will receive designations this school year out of the 869, which is almost 50% of our designated teachers at our TIA campuses. So absolutely we do want to expand, but we are doing it cautiously because we want to ensure that we still have a positive correlation for that data validation.
Okay, and just one more thing in line with that, and I think you've heard it. We've been, Trustee May and myself, being up there at the legislature as much as we have been, the one thing we keep hearing is that, but you have TIA money, you can get TIA money, and they don't.
Right.
I know legislatively their thoughts are that you can pay your teachers more if you're doing this TIA.
Right.
I don't know if they fully understand what goes into that. And I didn't fully understand until the presentation and my learning prior to the presentation, trying to learn it. So we've got, if in their minds they think they're giving us money to work with, we've got to find a way to access that money.
So yes.
I'm thankful for your expertise and your knowledge in this, because I'd like to see every opportunity for our teachers to access it.
For sure, absolutely. And the funds come from the state once those teachers are designated. So they have to meet statewide performance standards in order to be able to become designated. Once they're designated, then the state releases those funds, and that goes directly to the teacher. So just like we want to be able to ensure that we get more teachers in, we also want to make sure that our validation is positive and we have a positive correlation. But by adding these additional assignments and adding MAP, that's definitely going to add additional assignments for our first, second grade reading, and then hopefully if we include MAP, that's going to also include our second grade reading and math teachers as well. So that's going to be an additional teacher set.
Anything we can do to unlock that money
Yes.
for pay. I mean,
Yes.
I'm like, as long as we can do it effectively.
Correct,
Because there's
yes.
nothing worse than them getting to the end and thinking they're not going to get it.
Absolutely,
So,
yes.
And can I ask just a clarifying question? So MAP across the board should help our data validation process, right? So it should bring us,
Absolutely.
which in theory, we're not committing us to anything here, right? But it should allow us to be more aggressive in the future
Yes.
about adding
Adding.
additional teachers, because when we're close to not validating our data, we have to be very cautious and add slowly. If we can,
Yep.
if our data can be show better correlation, then we can be more aggressive in adding. So we have a chance to really kind of ramp it up in the future. So
do I have a motion?
I would like to motion that we adopt Northwest Evaluation Association measures of academic progress and growth for the 2025-26 school year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor show by the uplifted hands.
Oh, I'd like to make an amendment
Oh.
to the motion.
Okay.
We just voted. We just, yeah.
I vote to adopt.
Okay, so it's too late to make the amendment because I already called for the vote. Okay, well, I called the vote.
It's fine.
Okay, all those in favor show by the uplift of hands. Okay, unanimous.
thank you all. Guys, thank you all. Appreciate you. Great work.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Moving on to our next section of item 4A, receive 2025-2026 preliminary budget overview.
All right, we're going to have Ms. Garza join us, and our primary purpose tonight in the workshop setting here is really item 4B, which is the health plan and premium update, because that is an item that is pressing on time. We will be asked at the board meeting in 2 weeks to approve the health plan, and so that is our primary purpose. But in speaking to Karen, and because of part of the recommendation that she's going to make regarding the health plan involves a discussion of fund balance, she felt like it was just important to run back quickly through the budget. I don't believe there's much new here than what you've already seen, but she just felt like that would be important. So we're gonna do that first, and then we'll get to really kind of the meat and potatoes portion. But you won't be asked to vote on anything tonight on either of these two items, but in 2 weeks we will vote on the health plan.
All right, well, good evening, President Odenweiler, members of the board, and Dr. Knoll. It is my pleasure to bring you a preliminary look at the 25-26 budget. I'm going to move through this fairly quickly as we are still early in the stages of the budget planning process, and obviously it's a legislative year, so we anticipate many changes coming between now and budget adoption time, but I wanted to kind of give you a picture of where we are in the current year, as that is going to kind of guide our discussion as we go into the health plan discussion later. So I want to thank our finance staff for their work in getting us to this point. We've done a lot of work already. There's a long ways to go, and then also Dr. Medford and her team for working through the allocation process with us, because that is one of the hugest tasks that we have in terms of the budget, working through all of that, because we had to get that done in preparation for the job fair that took place this last weekend. So thank them for that information. I always like to start out with our awards for transparency and financial. I won't talk about all of the awards on this slide, but I like to focus on the transparency stars at the center of the screen. Our newest one is the Open Government and Compliance Star that we received this last year. Dr. Blakelock and her team were instrumental in helping us attain that star, and I am happy to announce that we are the only school district in the state of Texas that has all 4 transparency stars. All right, so looking at our challenges moving into the 25-26 budget year, obviously it is a legislative year, so we're awaiting action on the legislature in terms of formula changes, so we've been keeping a close eye on that. We're working our way out of a deficit budget. We did adopt an $11.9 million deficit budget this current year, and then there is no funding mechanism in the current formula to provide a raise for our employees or address inflation. And then depending on what happens with education savings accounts, we don't know what kind of impact that's going to have on our enrollment, so we're having to kind of plan around that and then continuing to support our growing special education population with the funding that we currently have. Looking at our budget assumptions for the upcoming school year, student enrollment, we're going to be very conservative at 73,500. ADA percentage, I did recommend that we adjust this to 93%. We're seeing a slight increase this year in attendance. And given the fact that we're being very conservative on our enrollment numbers, I felt like it was okay for us to adjust that up a little bit to make it more reflective of where we've been. Certified property value growth, we do not have any information from MCAD yet. It's too early. We're using conservative numbers at 5%. And then our projected tax rate, projecting a decrease of 1.48 cents. That is based on current law. I do anticipate this to be in the 3 to 5 cent range once we get our updated compression rates for next school year. This is just a 10-year history of our average enrollment.
I'm sorry, that was too quick.
Sorry. So if you look at the 2026 line, that's 73,500, using 93%, that puts us at 68,355 for average daily attendance.
So Ms. Garza, for my benefit, can you confirm what we estimated for this current year for enrollment?
74 is what we budgeted on last year, yes. So just a reminder again, the difference between average daily attendance and enrollment. Our revenue is based on average daily attendance. That's how the state funds us. This is simply days that they are in attendance divided by the total number of days of instruction. So if there's 174 days in the school year and a student is present all 174 days, we get 1 ADA for that student. So we're recommending 93% for next year. 1% in ADA funding is worth about $5 million to the district. Now on the flip side of that, our expenditures are based on actual enrollment. We have to staff our classrooms based on the actual number of students enrolled. And that funding gap of 7% is worth about $35 million to the district and when you compare enrollment to ADA.
Sorry, just real quick, I know we've talked about in the past trying to bump up our ADA percentage. How is that coming along? I guess that hasn't been that long. It's been a couple months, but any updates?
It is up this year, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is up this year, and as we've shared, our Student Support Services Principal Committee team, you might have seen one of their big kickoff graphics, which was like helping the families plan ahead based on when would be an ideal time to vacation or make doctor's appointments. We've actually gotten really good traction and positivity over that, so we're hoping these little things where we just keep having the conversation with our community year-round is really helping, but that team's just getting kind of started on the work.
Shout out to Dr. Taylor for her leadership on that.
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot of posters too around campuses, like it's very well advertised.
And I like that we're pushing it not for sending sick children to school, but other ways of making sure we're increasing our attendance.
Absolutely, being very intentional, yes, yes. They've had lots of discussions.
And I also wanted to say, I saw a principal talking to his families on a YouTube presentation, and he talked to his families about how important attending school was. So, you know, I think all of this is incredible.
All right, so this is just our enrollment in graph format, still growing. Pace has slowed down a little bit, but we are still adding students each year. Our special education student count continues to be a challenge for us in terms of keeping up with that growth and then all of the things that go along with it. And really the primary reason for this growth is just a change in eligibility in terms of what qualifies for special education services. So we are anticipating probably to exceed that projected number for 2025. I did confirm with Dr. Wiggins today that there's over 1,400 evaluations that are in the queue right now that are not included in the number. So we anticipate this number growing even further than we're seeing here.
And if I could just on that one, I think you explained that very well, but I just want to touch on that again, because if you look at this, you think, wow, our special education numbers are skyrocketing.
Right.
But we know, and Dr. Knoll and I have talked about this at length really, that TEA many, many years ago imposed a cap on special education. And so what we're seeing is a natural release of the cap. And now what we need is we need our state to fund it properly. So that's what I think, you know, a lot of us have been going to the Capitol to work on. And Dr. Knoll, do you have anything you want to add about
I think
that?
it's not that the children that we serve have changed dramatically, like you see here. The big difference, you talk about that cap, just to be clear, as a district, we never had a cap. We never didn't serve a child because of the state's cap that existed. We always made the best decision that we could for a child, to the point where many of us as principals, you know, there used to be a punitive setup where you'd have students automatically be counted as failures from the state because if you had too many special education. But we did that, so that's okay. We took those failures. We never did not qualify children in the district who should have qualified. But to the point of what Karen said, what changed is the state had parameters about how you qualify for special education, and I'm sure they had actuarial knowledge of how many people would qualify based on the rules that they had. Well, they have really changed those rules in the last few years after getting in trouble for the cap. And so that means of the students that we test, and Kendra could probably give us a true number, but the percentage of children that we test now, a much higher percentage actually qualify than would have qualified under the old rules. So that's why you're seeing this increase. So once again, you can be misleading because you can look at this and think like, oh, our population has changed. It's not the population that's changed, it's the rules from the state as to how a child qualifies have changed. So.
And the dyslexia population was really, barred from their rights under IDEA, and so that was kind of the last component. So I know that it looks like a lot of this is coming from that, but that was kind of the last piece of the puzzle. Well, actually, the last piece of the puzzle will be the funding piece. And then I also just very quickly wanted to talk about the basic allotment penalty. Can you explain that a little bit? You and I have talked about this at length, and I think this is something that the board would benefit from hearing.
Okay, so special ed is funded on what's known as an FTE basis. So they've assigned an FTE or a weighted amount of time that each student spends outside the classroom given the instructional setting that they're in. And they calculate an FTE, and that's what drives our weighted funding. Well, on the basic allotment side, there is an offset. So if we're funded on a 0.45 FTE for a special education student, our basic allotment funding is reduced by a corresponding 0.45. So we're losing money out of the basic allotment for the time that these students are spending outside the classroom. And we all know that those expenses don't decrease. That teacher is still in the classroom, we're still heating the classroom, we're still cleaning the classroom. There's still a classroom full of students, even though they've pulled a handful of students out to go into a different instructional setting for a portion of the day. So it is essentially penalizing our basic allotment, or our general ed allotment, for the time these students are outside of the classroom. And I know Ms. May and her group have been fighting really hard to have them look at this to see if they could just do away with the disability penalty, is what we're calling it, because it's worth about $18 million to us if they were to take it away. So it would involve change in law, obviously, but that is something that would be a substantial increase in funding if they were to remove that.
I don't mean to keep going on this, but I'm going to, because this is a prime opportunity for us to educate the people that we need to be heard. This affects all children, every student in our district, not just SPED students. This penalty affects every single student, and technically every single employee as well, because that's less money in there. Not to mention, the district is already spending $30 million more on SPED funding than we're getting for SPED funding. So you take that $18 million, that $30 million, that's what's coming out of our general basic allotment. And that's critical. So I just want the people to know your voices need to be heard in Austin to let them know to fix this basic. If we get nothing done but this, it would be huge for our district and every district in the state of Texas. So just, that's my soapbox.
Thank you. I know this wasn't the point of the
You're
presentation, but I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Well, and I know you said that. I'd like to compliment Ms. May and her team that are working on that, but I also want to compliment Karen because there are a lot of CFOs across the state that don't fully understand this, and in a lot of ways, Karen's voice has been a leader. I've seen her quoted, although she hasn't been in Austin. I've seen her quote travel.
She's a little famous in our world right
that's
now.
Right.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Garza.
All right, and once again, a reminder, when we're looking at our budget for the upcoming school year, we have to keep in mind our spending requirements that are related to all of our special program allotments. You'll see them identified here in the green. And then this is looking at our program area spending for 23-24 for compliance. The green bar represents the actual allotment that we receive from the state. The yellow bar is what we are required to spend based on that previous slide. And then the blue bar is what we are actually spending. And of course, there's a clear outlier here. And so hopefully we can make some progress in this area this legislative session to help us close that gap on special education funding. So just a quick overview of our current tax rate at 0.9496. The two components, our maintenance and operations portion at 0.6696, and then our debt service at 0.28. This is a 5-year history of our tax rate. This is a look at our peer district tax rates, and I've included in the blue portion, which is the M&O portion this time around, the number of tier 2 pennies that all of these districts are accessing. And I only show this slide to make the point that oftentimes we're asked, well, why can't you have a starting teacher pay similar to Humble or New Caney? And this is the reason why. And I'm not recommending a Vader. We're just trying to educate our community in how funding works and why some of our surrounding districts are able to do some of the things that they're doing, because they have chosen to access these additional tier 2 enrichment pennies that generate additional funding for the district, essentially making that cup that we talked about at previous workshops larger. You know, there's still a shared responsibility in who's filling the cup, but it helps to make the cup bigger when you're accessing these pennies.
But did they access those pennies before they were required to have Vaders, most of them?
Some of, the majority of them, probably yes.
So they
Yes.
accessed those before they were the requirement. And so
Yes.
for us, with the only 5 pennies accessed, I mean, they exercised that right before, and now it's, so they already had it out
That is
there out
true.
of the gate. So
That's
we're not
true.
in that same
Challenge
boat.
to get there now, right?
Yes.
And just to be clear, I know we added the line on the bottom of total property value, Karen, but just to be clear, that total property value only impacts the amount of funding that's received from the green portion of these bars.
Correct.
The blue portion of the bars, the property value has nothing to do with the amount of funding we receive from the blue portion of these bars. So it's based purely on enrollment. It is not based on property value of the community. So just to make sure, make that distinction.
And the green only services our debt.
Correct.
That is correct.
Yes.
And
a good
that's where
distinction to
property
make,
value
yeah.
matters, right? That
it does matter
helps
because
us to
it's-
generate more revenue for the debt service side when our property values go up.
Thank you.
And this is a new slide that we added this year. Thank you, Mrs. Dawson, for recommending this. It's kind of interesting to see. This is the average taxable value for our peer districts for homeowners and what they are paying in property taxes. So you see Spring Branch, their average taxable value is $521,000, and their average taxpayers are paying $5,600 in property taxes. The two districts on this slide that are actually paying recapture are Spring Branch and Fort Bend. So that means they have copper pennies, that they are generating more local revenue on those pennies than the entitlement for that tier 2 penny is worth. So they are having to pay money back to the state.
They also made like huge cuts recently too, didn't they?
Yes. Yeah. I was kind of surprised by Spring Branch. I knew they were a property wealthy district, but I didn't know that it was this high. Yeah. So this is what a gold and copper penny are worth for Conroe ISD based on our weighted average daily attendance, which is the kind of the driver and that guaranteed yield that the state sets. $12.5 million for a gold penny and $4.7 million for a copper penny. So looking at our 25-26 funding estimate, this is our total revenue increase that we are recommending for next year. And of course, this again is based on current law. There's going to be a lot of changes to this as we move through the legislative session. 7.36 million for property tax increase based on that 5% growth. State funding increase of 9.37, and primarily the driver here is that over 65 hold harmless correction that is now flowing through the formulas. About $7.5 million of that is in that $9.37 million number. We're going to add additional revenue for our TIA program. There'll be an offset to this on the expenditure side. And then as interest rates continue to decline, we're going to make an adjustment to our interest earnings number because we do anticipate that slowing down as interest rates decline. And then TRS on behalf, that's that pass-through entry that we're required to make. There'll be an offsetting expenditure for this as well. So 19.23 million in additional revenue for next year, and then of course based on current law. Talked about the allocation process. We've worked through this already. The majority of our allocations have been released for campuses so that they could prepare for the job fair this last weekend. We are 90% payroll, so this was a huge obstacle for us to get through in terms of getting those initial allocations out to campuses. And thank you again to Dr. Medford and her team for helping us through this.
Ms. Garza, I have
Yes.
a question
Mhm.
on specifically, just as an example, the allocations. Did we reduce the number of art teachers per campus at elementary?
We did not make any changes to our
I
formulas.
just want that out there publicly.
Yes.
I was asked this last night, and it was a shock to me. I didn't think, my answer was we haven't made any
We did not.
reductions, so I just want that public.
No, we didn't change the formula.
We
So
didn't
there
change
could
it.
be a campus that may have lost an art teacher if the
Based on
campus
enrollment.
shrunk.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay, so
That
that
could
would
have happened,
only
but we did
be
not
based-
change the formula that generates an art teacher.
Fantastic.
And
That was
that's,
my answer.
you can see that on the chart, how many art teachers they get. It's based on enrollment. So
Oh,
yes,
I
we
was
did
ahead of you
have
on that question. Yes,
Yeah.
but I wanted to point that out publicly.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I'm not going to show you all the grade spans. This is just an example of the level of detail that we go through after those allocations are aligned to each individual campus to make sure that we have equity in terms of staffing among all our campuses based on these formulas.
And I have one more question about
Mhm.
that. Is there a specific line item for behavior coaches? I see instructional coaches, but just no.
So behavior coaches would be funded out of Title I for our Title I campuses.
Thank you.
So we only have those at Title I campuses?
No, if they don't, they can also like trade in an allocation. So junior high gets a certain number, high schools get a certain number of teaching allocations, and they make choices on those based on what their campus needs.
So
That's where we.
The behavior coach comes out of which allotment, is my question?
It depends on the campus. So they may choose to use one of their teaching allocations that they have, because the instructional coach for us is the same designation as a teacher, so that it's the same pay grade. Or they could use their title funds to do so.
Or a behavioral coach, right?
For a behavior coach, they have either of those options.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
funding is both, but up to the campus.
Okay.
Oops. All right, so and there's a lot of numbers on this slide. These are the personnel changes that we're recommending for next year, again, based on current law and the funding that we have available right now. But I'll draw your attention to the bottom right corner of this slide. We are recommending total FTE additions of 110.5 to the general fund at a cost of 5.8 million. If you'll move just slightly upwards on the slide, you'll see the green portion says special education. We have been really intentional about making sure that we try to prioritize special education. So of that 5.8 million, 4.2 of that is positions directly related to supporting our special education population at 78.
And are these new positions, or we're just trying to replace those?
These are new special ed positions. So you can see the green right above that box, instructional positions, 31 teachers, 39 paraprofessionals. And I will tell you, this is not all that Kendra asked for. We had to give her what we thought we could afford for now, to get her going for the job fair, and then obviously to support what she needs for the new campuses that are opening. But we've scraped the surface in terms of what the needs are, but we're working with a finite amount of funding right now, and so trying to give them at least something to get them going for next year.
So how short are we in this number? What did she ask for versus what we're giving
She
here?
asked for 51 teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Are we moving up to the top graph?
Yes, so I was going to talk about that
Oh,
next.
okay.
So if you look at campus positions, that 7.5 overall net gain for the campuses, you would expect that number to be higher, but Remember, we talked about what we budgeted last year for enrollment. We staffed our campuses last year based on 74,000 students. Our enrollment projection for next year, even though it's a growth from where we're at currently, is an actual reduction of where we budgeted last year. So that's why that number looks like it does. And then if you look at elementary compared to K-6, you'll see a huge shift in staff there, and that is because Campbell and Isler are both K-6s, so when we rezoned, all of the teacher movement moved from a K-4 to a K-6, and that's why you're seeing that shift there.
I noticed, I think it's like 12 or 13 different, somewhere in there is the difference.
Yes.
That's it.
I have one more question about special education. How did we do at the job fair with candidates for special education? I know that the pipeline is a whole nother issue.
I don't think we have exact numbers yet. I know just, walking around talking, you saw a range, truthfully, of like, I filled mine, I'm still looking. So I don't, until we can kind of get the rec to hires in and they check references and get all of those sent in, we'll be able to give you an update. But some places left feeling really excited about it, and some were like, I still have work to do. So
I noticed almost every campus had an opening in special ed.
Well, yes, when you're adding 31
Yeah.
and then just in the turnover that we have,
Yeah.
it's which is why you heard Ms. Jackson mention we're adding it to TIA, especially the program teachers, because
Great.
we're really working to keep the ones that we have here.
And shout out to Dr. Wiggins for going to the University of Houston, I
Go
think,
Cougs.
for their 3, I think, out SPED students that are going to be graduating.
So it was good. What the final numbers are, we'll still have to see.
Can I ask a little bit more about the technology coaches?
Sure. So I've got in parentheses that those are not new positions. Those are positions that were formerly funded out of Medicaid. And because of the reduction in funding in Medicaid, we're bringing them to the general fund. So though it shows 25 new support positions, 6 of those are existing employees that we currently have. And of those 25, 14 of those are police officers and custodians that are going to support Campbell and Isler, our new campuses. So in terms of actual new support allocations, there's very, very few. And we were very intentional about this too. The needs were more than what you see here, but trying to keep it to where we thought we could afford for now until additional funding. The campus allocations have all been released, like I said, to help them prepare for the job fair, and then these remaining support positions will be released as we get closer to summer.
And just to make the point on those support positions, you can see the titles. The way we operate with that is Dr. Medford maintains a list from all departments of their needs, as well as Karen does on the finance side, and we basically prioritize that list, and it becomes a long list. And as we're working through this, we draw a line as to what we can afford. But you can see on here the only ones that really made the list this year were places that we feel like the investment will grow. So like if we want to grow TIA, we have to add another person in there to help us expand that, right? So
That was exactly
by
what I was
expanding that, we may bring in millions of more dollars, but if we don't invest that person, we can't. Same thing with HR and hiring, right? We are short people in HR. We know because we've heard the feedback that sometimes it slows us down and it costs us candidates, so that's a place to invest. So that's what you're seeing there are places that we were very intentional about. We have to invest here.
Is the same for the grant specialist, or is that do we already have a grant? We have one grant person.
We
or
have
is that
3.
in-
I spoke to them at the job fair. I just want to give them a shout out because great.
So
great
this is an
role.
addition?
That would
This
be
is
a
an
fourth.
addition to support. So Dr. Wiggins doesn't have a grant specialist. She manages her budget
Specific for special ed
by
funding.
herself. So this is to help Dana, who's our current director, adding a grant specialist there to take some of that off of Dr. Wiggins' plate because it is extensive.
And we've never had a grant specialist for special ed?
Dr. Wiggins is the grant specialist for special ed.
But is that true? We have 3, currently 3 people handling our federal money.
For Title 1 through Title
Title.
4, and I'm looking for grants. They're the ones that
Yeah.
support Mr. McCord and his
I was-
buses.
I was blown
they
away
are,
by that.
They're amazing. And so we're giving them an additional staff member so that they can take on the IDB budget as well for Dr. Wiggins.
And I would like to point out that while we are mindful of trying to maintain, to manage the hiring, et cetera, because we don't want to divide it and dilute it and everything, but we're really blessed to have the grant specialist, because that's, in order to get a lot of the extra funding, you have to have one of those, or else you have to let the funding, the extra money go by. And if we weren't doing that, I asked for the numbers not too long ago, and we're far outweighing what we're bringing in with the salaries and benefits that we're paying, because I did ask that question because I was concerned about it, you know. And then I heard from other districts, yeah, we don't have anyone for grants, and we have to let that, and even in state legislature, they give grant money, and unfortunately it's one-time lump sums, but they'll give grant money, but they can't even apply for it because they don't have someone to do it.
And they're extensive. Some of these grant applications are wow, and that team is absolutely
So
amazing.
I'm
A
pointing
prime
that out as well.
A prime example of that is our bus grants.
Yes.
Dana and her team have been able to secure over $4 million in bus grants for us to put new buses on the road. So, I mean, that in
That
and of
alone
itself.
pays for the
I
team
mean,
for years
those
and
are all
years.
competitive grants that they're having to fill out extensive applications, and then there's a follow-up when the buses arrive that we have to dispose of old buses, and so it's a very detailed, and Juan and his team in transportation as well have been very integral in helping us get that money, but $4
we
million is a lot.
Have we ever considered contracting the grants out?
We have not.
Just curious.
And to your point, Mrs. Odenweiler, we have had some grants from the state that we've applied for and received kind of more than our share because not enough districts applied. Because it was cumbersome and maybe they didn't have anybody to do it. So we get that advantage because we hit every one that we see.
To Trustee Nelson's question just a second ago, it's funny that you mentioned that because I was talking with someone about grants and grant funds and so forth, and people that contract them out, and interestingly enough, there's not that many that do school ones.
Oh, I know quite a few.
So, but it was,
Yeah.
it was just that it was interesting when I brought it up to him.
I do that professionally, so I know quite a few. Yeah.
But I was just saying that that
Yeah.
was one of those things that it's probably more specialized, so.
Can I just ask a quick question, looking at the technology coaches, is that something we've ever looked into paying for out of the IMTA funds because that is a usage for it, or are we doing that at all?
They actually were there for 1 year. That we removed them from Medicaid in this current year and put them on IMTA, but we need the funding in IMTA for other things. So it was a 1 year deal. We knew that when we did it, that we were going to eventually have to bring them to the general fund. You remember last year we brought almost $3.7 million from Medicaid to the general fund. We were trying to kind of gradually do this over time, and then depending on what happens with Medicaid next year, you know, hopefully the hope is that we can keep what's there for now if funding improves, but we were trying to do this in a gradual way. So we were able to find a funding source for these coaches for 1 year out of IMTA, but we have to bring them now because they need that funding for other things.
And one of the things we've talked about a lot even here is making sure teachers have all the things they need. And so that's one of the funds that we can be very tight with, making sure that teachers have, whether it's, we talked about getting graphing calculators at one point, but when teachers say they need the things, they want all of the things, we want to really protect that fund in order to provide that for them and have positions where it makes the most sense, right? So it's all about balancing all of these different funds, but hearing what teachers need, that's the fund that we need to use for teacher resources, for instructional materials specifically.
Ms. Garza, speaking of Medicaid, did we find out, or I know we got audited for previous year's income or funding that we received. Are they going to go back any further?
No, I mean, the notice that we received for repayment, I believe it was $111,000, was related to the lawsuit that happened in 2011. So we're already in the process of repaying that. They just netted it against our interim payments for the year, so that will be taken care of. There is a bill that's been introduced. Now this is all preliminary, House Bill 500, that they're putting $934 million into to support districts that lost money from Medicaid. So from what I understand, it's going to be one-time funding, but at least maybe we can recapture some of that money that was taken away from us over the last 3 years.
Thank you.
All right, so looking at our expenditure budget increase projected for next year, again, based on current law, our $5.89 million for personnel changes that we just talked about on the previous slide. We're going to make a slight reduction to summer school and then discontinuing the Reading Academy stipend for a savings of $1.5 million. This is the offset to our teacher incentive allotment for $1 million. And then software costs, we did put a line item in here. We've been very intentional about making investments in software that is more applicable to a district our size, with our website software design, our two-way messaging, our Incident IQ, which is our comprehensive inventory software. And then every time we turn around and there's a renewal on software, prices are increasing. And so we just felt like this was an area that we needed to put a dedicated line to add to the budget to support all of the areas, because this extends from transportation all the way to our servers and our software that we use to run our financial systems. All of those areas, when we get the renewals every year, there's an increase in fees, and so we felt like this was an area that was underfunded in our budget, so we've got $1 million line item for that. And then other expenses, utilities for our new campuses, fuel, and then property insurance. We're still in the process of that. We've got a placeholder in there for that, and then just general supply increases. And then this is the offset to our TRS on behalf, the $4 million that you saw on the revenue side. So 12.09 estimated expenditure increase. So putting this all together, total revenue estimate of $719.3 million and total expenditures of $724.06 million. That puts us at a slight budget deficit of 4.76. And again, we're early. If additional funding comes, we will make adjustments based on what comes. And, you know, we were trying to get this as close to balanced as we could so that when funding comes, we can attribute most of it to a raise. So we will continue to refine this and watch as the legislature moves through the process to see if we can bring this closer to balanced budget. But for now, this is kind of where we stand. Like I said, we have a long ways to go until the final budget's adopted.
Will you be bringing forth items potentially to tighten if things are not going the way that we want them to go?
If the legislature looks like, you know, worst case scenario and we don't think we're going to get any funding, we can then kind of revisit where we were going to make adjustments. And then maybe depending on where our fund balance is at the end of the year, we could move forward with a small deficit budget. We'll just see. You know, we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens with funding from the state, but we're hopeful that something will happen this year.
Regarding funding from the state, can you tell me what your pie in the sky, what your middle level, and what your super baseline level is? Like, what are you looking for?
I mean, we would like enough to support a very substantial raise for 2 years, because whatever funding we get has to last us the biennium. So ideally, if we could get enough to support a raise for 2 years, anything substantial would probably be $25 million a year. You know, if we were going to do something in the 4 to 5% range. So that's pie in the sky. I don't believe that's going to happen. I think it's probably going to be more in the $20 to $30 million range for the biennium. The committee substitute for House Bill 2 is looking a little more positive for us. It's a $395 increase in the basic allotment, so that's $9 million for every $100 they increase. So that in and of itself would be pretty substantial. Now, it would allow us to do something pretty good for a raise for next year, but probably wouldn't support anything substantial for the following year. But in reality, I kind of think that's probably where it'll be. I'm thinking between 20 and 25 million is.
For the biennium?
So 2.5% raise costs us
we're just
about
guessing.
17.
Right.
We're
We don't know.
guessing.
It's
We're
just
completely
purely a guess.
guessing. I mean, this is, lots of things could change.
And we adopt the budget, sorry, I'm new board member question.
Yes.
Just clarifying, we adopt the budget in July, correct?
August.
August,
At the August
okay.
regular board meeting, yes.
So June, the dust will settle, we'll have a better idea. Okay.
We'll be coming back. We'll talk about all of this again,
Yes.
right? We'll see it before.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Much clearer picture then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So things that are not accounted for in the budget that was just presented to you, obviously an employee raise, and then additional special education staffing if we have funding to support it, additional support staff, and then increased costs due to inflation. So now just an update on our fund balance. Wanted to give you an update on the over 65 hold harmless correction that we brought to you in December for our over 65 residents. As you recall, when we discussed that correction in December, it was worth about $17.5 million to us, and that's broken into two components. The first $10 million of that is attributed to tax year 23. That correction has been filed. It has been certified by the Property Tax Division to TEA, and now we are just awaiting them to load those corrections into the summary of finances, which will then ultimately result in payment to the district. So that'll go straight into our fund balance. And then the $7.5 million is that correction that's flowing through the values this year that's already been in the preliminary values that were released by the Property Tax Division in January. So we're seeing that flow through the formulas this year. So that money is coming to fruition. So looking
Will
at
that
our...
be an annual savings, or is it just for these years?
It should be annual, unless they make changes to...
For the 7.5
the
million,
7.5,
that will be
yeah,
ongoing?
that's recurring, yes.
Props to Ms. Garza for
Thank you.
identifying that.
So now looking at our unassigned fund balance, we ended 23-24 with an unassigned fund balance of $156.5 million. And then based on the budget that we adopted for the current year, we were anticipating that fund unassigned to drop to 144.6 because we did adopt a $11.9 million deficit budget. We are projecting our fund balance unassigned to be at 162.9 for the end of this year, as a result of that $10 million payment and then the 7.5 that's flowing through the formulas this year. So that's an $18.3 million increase over what we were anticipating. Now we're only 6 months through the fiscal year, so this is a projection at this point, but we're trying to be very conservative at this point.
Where are you getting that extra, the 18.3? I see 17.5.
So some of that is coming from just student special weighted funding for our special education population growth. So that generates additional state funding over what we had budgeted.
Ms. Garza,
And if our attendance is a little higher than we
Correct.
budgeted, then we'll
Correct.
generate a little.
but right
excess.
now, currently, since we estimated a 74,000 enrollment, and we're only at 72,916 currently, is that correct? So we're looking at a $6.7 million
So
loss.
combination of, yes, even though enrollment is short of where we thought we were going to be, and this same scenario happened last year, right? So enrollment isn't where we thought it was going to be, but our weighted funding is higher than we thought it was going to be because the growth in the special programs and then that increase in attendance is also helping to drive that funding up as well.
Okay. So that's not going to hurt us as badly as it
No.
seems.
No.
And we may have vacancies along the way that we didn't
Sure.
fill because of that lower enrollment. And we always have vacancies throughout the year too. There's always payroll savings at some point too. So that generates some of this money at the end of the year as well.
So we're in a much better place in terms of fund balance going into the new year. So if we look at our 25-26 budget, that is currently what I shared with you at $724 million. Our target at 20% of that would be $104.8 million. And if we're projecting at 162.9, so that puts us with capacity going into the next fiscal year at $18.1 million, or 22.5% of our budget. Now, keep in mind this budget does not include a raise, so if we're able to provide a substantial raise for our employees, the denominator changes, right? So we have to do 20% of a higher number. But like I said, we're in a much better place in terms of fund balance, and this is kind of the reason I wanted to share this information with you before we did the health plan, because this is going to come into play when we start our discussion on the health plan. So just store this picture in your...
So Ms. Garza, the 18.1 million, that's what will be going into our fund balance?
That is, so our goal is to keep 20% in our savings account, right? So 20% of our annual budget we want to keep in our savings account. So this means that we have 18.1 million more than the 20% in our savings account.
I just can't help but notice it's strikingly similar to when we pulled 18 million out for a couple of years
Yeah,
ago.
no.
No,
Unrelated.
just a coincidence.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so what's next? We will finalize our revenue projections based on legislative changes. We'll continue to refine our state funding, and then as local assessed values start to come in, we'll start to get a preliminary look at those sometime this month. That will drive tax rate calculations, and then we will look at finalizing our expenditure projections. We will go to the district level planning and decision making committee in July. And then at the July 15th board meeting, we'll bring you an update on where we're at with the budget. And then August 5th, we'll hold the first of 2 public hearings on the budget. And then on the 19th, we will have a second public hearing on the budget and tax rate. And then at that meeting, we will ask you to adopt the tax rate and the budget for the upcoming school year. Questions?
This is just a really quick question. Going back to the fund balance, that's
Mhm.
22.5%. The minimum is 22%, correct?
Our stated goal is that we want to keep at least 20%.
Okay, and we can't use any of that excess for raises?
No, because that would be one-time money. So the only way we can give a raise is if we have
Stipends?
recurring revenue.
Stipends?
It could be used for a stipend. So if you wanted to use one-time money, you could certainly do that. So we wouldn't recommend it at this time, but as we move into next year's budget, when money flows in for a raise, you could be in a position to say, maybe you want to do a certain percentage of raise, and then if this still looked to this point, you might could designate, and we're going to do a $1,000 stipend, and
Right.
at some point throughout the year, you could preload that if it still looks this,
Okay.
that we're there.
Okay, thank you.
So that was the easy portion of tonight's meeting. Dr. Medford's going to run before we get to the next. So the next piece here is, it's the benefit plan design. So this is our, and Karen will explain it, but we have basically a self-funded, employee-owned health plan, and kind of like taxes. The taxes always feel like they go up, and our insurance rates always feel like they go up. Karen will show a picture here. We haven't raised our rates in 4 years, but as we see every month, the plan is on the wrong side this year, and so we're going to have to do some things to make sure that our plan remains solvent and we can continue to move forward. And Karen, and I'll let you introduce everybody, but we have a great team of people, including our Employee Benefits Committee, that are trying to work through, but this is heavy discussion. It's not fun. It's reality.
All right, so I'll introduce our special guests at the table. I have Derek Eco from Gallagher. He is our benefits consultant and has been integral in our conversations around the benefit plan and comes with a wealth of knowledge in this industry. And then Tiffany Matfeld, who is our Assistant Director of HR over benefits. So they will both be helping me with the presentation tonight. Derek and I are kind of tag team through some of the slides here, but before we get started, I did want to thank the Employee Benefits Committee for serving on the committee and taking time out of their own personal time. Our meetings are typically after hours at 4:30 in the afternoon, and so they're giving of their time to be on this committee. Our committee chair, Debbie Petrie, is in the audience tonight, so I want to thank her and recognize her for being here. And like Dr. Null said, this is a heavy conversation that we're about to have, and unfortunately, it's not something we can ignore, and we have to move forward. And the timing of this, I know, is not ideal because we've not been able to announce a raise, but this is here, and it's something we can't ignore, and we have to deal with it. We've had a really good run the last 4 or 5 years with our health plan, and unfortunately, this year has hit us hard. So we're going to kind of walk you through what we're seeing. So here's our timeline. On March 5th, we met with the Employee Benefits Committee to kind of go through our initial plan design options for the next school year, share the information with them kind of on what's happening in the current year, and then our recommendations for the changes for next year. We let them kind of sit on that information for a couple of weeks and have the opportunity to ask questions of us. And then on March 19th, we brought them back together to kind of revisit the plan design and go through it one more time, and then we asked them to vote on the recommendation to bring to you on the plan design changes that we were recommending for next year, and we had 95% approval of what the recommended plan design changes were for next year from the committee. So tonight we're bringing you the initial plan design discussions that we've had with the Employee Benefits Committee and allow you to ask questions And then on April 15th, we will ask you to approve the plan design changes. And this will be something we will need to get done this month because we need to move forward with summer enrollment, and there's a lot of things that need to take place between now and when summer enrollment starts in terms of getting benefit guides printed and all of the things that go along with that. So this is your opportunity to ask questions, and then we will come back to you on the 15th with the recommendation and ask for your approval at that time.
How many people are on the committee?
The committee is made up of 31 employees.
Was this stood up just for this, or is it always operating?
No, they
This
meet
committee?
once a month. This is
this
an
is
ongoing
just an
standing,
ongoing,
yes,
okay.
yes. So what does it mean to be self-funded versus fully insured? So a self-funded health plan is essentially that we as the employer are assuming the risk of providing health care for our employees versus purchasing insurance from an insurance company that is fully insured. Why we choose self-funded is it allows us to customize a plan that meets the needs of our employees, and then we maintain control over the reserves in the plan, like we have the last several years when the plan has done well. The fund balance was ours to keep. It's the employees. It's really the employees that are participating in the plan. It's their money. And then we're free to choose who our third-party administrator is. We are currently using Blue Cross Blue Shield. We are in our 3rd year of our contract with them. And then TRS also has a self-funded plan. It's what the state's self-funded plan is called, TRS Active Care. Movement in and out of that plan is restrictive. You have to stay for 5 years once you're in the plan. They determine the rates. They determine the providers. The financial history of that plan has been questionable. And then we have no control over whether TRS experiences a bad year. We do have catastrophic loss insurance in place, so if we have an individual claim that exceeds $550,000, our plan is no longer liable for any of those expenses. Our insurance policy then kicks in and takes on the loss of those claims. Our district contribution is $446 per employee per month. State requires that you contribute $225. So where does the money come from in the plan? Primarily 2 sources, right? Employee contribution made up through premiums, and then that district contribution of $446 per employee per month, and that is where the revenue for the plan comes from. So on that schedule that I show you at each month's board meeting, the revenue section is primarily made up of these 2 things. We do earn a little bit of interest money on our fund balance that sits in the bank, but primarily this is where the revenue is coming from.
I'm sorry, could we go back? I'm just trying to understand this self-funded plan. It sounds like we're kind of in the insurance business. Am I understanding that correctly? Like what, does it save us money to have a self-funded plan versus a fully insured plan?
Yes, it does. As Karen was talking about before, in a traditional fully insured mechanism, what happens is they rate your plan based upon your experience and your overall population, right? Health risks, all of those things, and they give you a set dollar rate that goes into it. And then on top of all of those things, there are other components that are built into those plans from a regulatory perspective, from a compliance perspective, from their own house money. All of those things are built into that. If you run at a better fashion, meaning that if your claims run better than what they took in premium, you capture none of those dollars, okay? If you run exceedingly higher than those, you also don't lose those dollars. In a self-funded mechanism, you more often than not win in these scenarios because we are capturing the delta between what an insurer would provide to you and what you're actually running in claims. And then we have what is catastrophic coverage and some other items to basically indemnify us of a really poor or really terrible year, right? So what could happen is, let's just say we had this same year in a fully insured mechanism, a increase of 35, 45% could happen to your total rates, an increase. And then that means that you are taking on more and more burden on that regard, as opposed to us changing a little bit of the budget and having a lot more control over those claims. So in the end, yes, you save money, especially at your size. Most employers of a size that's, basically above 500, but really over 1,000, are going to self-fund their own plans because of the savings that they can have by controlling those things.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
You may say this, speak to it more later in the presentation, but really, we kind of have two options: self-funded or join the TRS path. I mean, that's really the kind of the two pathways that exist for us. And Karen's last slide kind of showed you the negatives of the TRS, that we don't have control, we can't control the doctors. You know, that's what people care about the most, right? Is my doctor in the plan? You lose all that control. That's why we've always stayed self-funded. One of the things that I believe we have to watch moving forward is just to make sure that we can continue to compete premium-wise with TRS. If there comes a point where the TRS plan is providing significantly lower premiums, that's when we may have to make a decision to make that change. And one of the things to watch, I'm probably like on Karen's slide 15, but one of the things to watch is what does the legislature do to the TRS plan, because it's state-owned. You know, if they go dumping a lot of money into that plan to basically buy down rates, we won't get any of that benefit because we're not in the plan. So it's just one of those things we have to watch moving forward.
We also have a lot better opportunity, if I understand correctly, to customize our plan for
1,000%.
For our community of employees.
Yes.
The only means for you to customize.
Yes. And that is one of the major positives I've heard over the years about Conroe's teacher insurance. I say teacher, it's the whole, all employees. But is that in general, it's a better plan than TRS. Not that anyone wants to spend more,
Right.
but that it's that they have more choices. They have better. Yeah, so there you go.
Do a lot of districts around us use CRS, or are they also?
We're going to share some benchmarking slides with you in a little bit that show what our surrounding
That's my
districts
fault.
are
I
doing.
pulled y'all ahead. I'm sorry.
We'll let you take that.
But to Derek's point, most large districts are self-funded. So this is kind of how the process works. We're going to move from the left to the right on this slide. So the provider, an employee goes to see a doctor. The bill then goes to our third-party administrator, which is Blue Cross Blue Shield. They process that claim. They then send that claim's information to us, the employer, that we owe X amount for that claim. We then approve payment, send them the money back, and then they send it to the provider. So that's kind of the cycle of how the money flows within the plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Derek.
Yeah, so this lies the rub. This is the problem I think Dr. Knoll was specifically referring to when you talk about, you know, costs are rising. So that red line right there is what we call national trend. And we take national trend from a bunch of different surveys. We have our own survey internally from our own national practice, as well as we take other consulting firms' survey as well. And on average, you know, we're looking at growth, you know, exceeding what is right now at a 8 to 9% leverage trend, meaning we take medical and we take pharmacy and we put those two together, and that's what we're growing at right now. That red line is what the national trend average has grown since 2021. So with your plan, that if we ran at average with no changes and just followed suit, that's where your line would have gone. Now that's not what happened with Conroe, and a few things we did to help deal with that. As you can see towards the end of that area, and really right at 9/1/22. So in 22, we adopted Blue Cross Blue Shield as your administrator. That administration change was in your benefit by a large degree, and that is because of the discounts that Blue Cross Blue Shield provides. So every time a claim is paid, Blue Cross Blue Shield is negotiating a better discount for that claim than what was your previous administrator with United Healthcare. Additionally, in 2023, we updated our pharmacy contract and moved our pharmacy benefit manager to Prime Therapeutics, or basically in conjunction with Blue Cross. That also brought down the overall cost. We anticipated that from 22 until the end of the 24 timeframe before the increase that I'll talk about in a second, that it was about a $12 million savings to the district because of those changes. So very large swings that helped us bring down that trend significantly, and that is why we've run at such a great fashion. We haven't had to increase contributions, those type of things. If you'll notice the very right-hand side on starting in July of 24, you see that bend up. All right, that rate went up very drastically. We went up 15% over the course of 12 months, which is a huge growth and development. When we look at budgets, reminder that we're looking at budgets far before your claims are coming in. Okay, we're looking at budgets and finalizing these budgets in April of this year, right? And we don't start our plan year for the next year until September, right? So we're having to update those and do those. We're making actuarial assumptions based upon a lot of different things, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But that upswing is really why we're looking at our budget today, is because over the course of the last a year, basically, we've increased significantly in those dollars. And that's nothing because the plan was, added something differently or anything like that. We just had an increase in utilization, an increase in how people were utilizing the plan, and that did cause a huge change. We're going to talk about that in a minute, though. Oh, I get to control now. Wow.
All right, so looking at our plan highlights for 23-24, just to kind of give you a high-level overview, total funding in the plan for 23-24 school year was $55.2 million. 33.8 of that came from employer contributions at $446 per month, and then the remaining 21.4 came from employee premium contributions. We covered around 6,200 employees on the plan, and then covered members, that's lives on the plan, is about 10,100, so that would be spouses and children in addition to the employees. Cost of medical claims ran about $50 million, and then pharmacy claims at $7.3 million. And then our fixed costs for that catastrophic loss insurance and our third-party administrator fees was around $6.9 million. These are the three plans that we currently have with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have a high deductible plan, and you can see the network of hospitals available to that plan. And then we have two HMO plans. The Blue Essentials plan has a wider network of hospitals available. And then our Blue Premier plan, Memorial Hermann and St. Luke's are the two providers in that plan. So you saw this at the last board meeting. So this is kind of where we're at year to date. And this is going to kind of guide our discussion and what we're going to need to look at doing for next year to kind of rectify what's happening in the current year. March, I will tell you, looks very similar to February. I would say it's probably in between January and February. We ran a slight deficit of, I believe, $150,000. We're still waiting on a couple of invoices to come in, but nothing drastic. I do anticipate April's going to be high because there's actually 5 weeks of settlement of claims that are going to come in April, which is unusual, just depending on how the calendar falls. So we could see a deficit in April, but we will just kind of wait and see how that all plays out.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any indication why this happened, or is it going to continue to happen, or is it an anomaly?
Higher utilization in the plan. We did look at high-cost claimants, which would be $50,000 or more for an individual employee, and they're almost double this year compared to where we were last year at this time. Cancer, musculoskeletal, heart disease, just lots of utilization on the plan. We have not had a claimant that has hit the stop loss this year, the 550, but just lots of them in the $70, $80, $150,000 range. So
you said we had, say that stat again, 50, you said something about 50.
So if we look at September 23 through January of 24, we had 52 high claimants for a cost of $4.2 million. That same time period, from 24 to 25, we had 86 at a cost of $10.4 million.
Ms. Garza, in regards to the $550,000 claim max, do we hit that in previous years? Have we ever had any?
We have, yes.
So that's common.
And it's not, well, super common, but yes, we have used it.
Okay.
We have not had to use it this year. which hopefully will help us get our premiums down for next year.
And just so I caught that, that's costing, that insurance to cover that overage or anything over that is 6.9 million?
That includes both that stop-loss insurance and then our third-party administrator fees that we pay to Blue Cross Blue Shield to administer all of our claims. That's, both of those are in that 6.9.
Thank you.
That's the catastrophic, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so here's where it gets sad. Here's our fund balance. Like I said, we had a good run. 2020, we had a fund balance of $7.2 million. We ended 24 at $7.8 million. We are projecting to have less than $500,000 at the end of this year if things trend as projected for the remainder of the year. So we have enough money in the bank, hopefully, to cover claims for this year, but we'll be going into next year with little to nothing in terms of reserves.
And just to be clear, this is a separate fund balance than the general fund
Yes.
balance. Just want to make sure that everybody understands
This
that.
money belongs to employees in the plan
So
because
Ms.
it,
Garza, just to going back to the United States map with the blue and the red lines, we were looking good up until about,
till the current plan year.
until May of last year. We were
Yes.
going downward
Mhm.
and then something, and we haven't gone back down.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and good is relative, right? You're still doing good versus the national trend, right? What you have put in
Relatively.
from a program perspective and everything like that has still significantly decreased your costs. It's just what you've been able to maintain and your budget never growing, right? Like in a private sector, for instance, you're changing your budget on a regular basis, right? You can have those adjustments and do that, as opposed to here, we have to ask for those funds and that general allotment from our district, that's not increasing unless we do that here.
So in April, you're basing your projections on on the life of this current coverage year on these last higher than average months.
And I'll explain the projection in a few minutes on another slide, but yeah, so we take what is basically 24 months of your claims and utilize that to project out into the future.
Okay.
Now, our weighting on how we view those things can change, right? Typically, an employer of your size, we're giving the most credibility to the most recent 12 months because you have such a large risk pool. You're more likely to run in that fashion. But because of how you all ran this year, specifically with a 15% increase, which was well above what we would even have you from a trend perspective, we don't want to give full weighting to that. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. We did adjust our projection based upon that because we don't think that you're going to run in this exact fashion. But still, we have to give credence to the claims that just happened.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Oh, just one more question about that map. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. The downward trend that started in September of 2022, that was because we changed plans, right?
Yes, you
And then
changed,
the upward
yes.
trend is because of more claims.
Yeah,
Okay.
those claims could have happened, right? And maybe we could have seen an upswing in those claims or like a stronger trended line, right? But in 2022, before we made the change to Blue Cross Blue Shield, we were projecting about an $8 million increase to the overall plan. And then with those, we've seen, and then plus the pharmacy changes in 2023, we assume basically a $12 million downward swing because of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so this is our three plans, moving from left to right, the high deductible plan and then the essentials plan. And the blue, on top of the blue bar graph on each of these is showing us what the per employee per month cost is for that plan. And you can see where the most of our employees are enrolled is in that blue essentials plan, which is that wider network. 3,841 of our employees are in that plan, and that is the plan that is performing the poorest at $1,010 per employee per month. So this is kind of what drives kind of our decisions in terms of plan design changes when we look at the poor performing plans compared to the plans that are performing better. And then if we look at budget compared to actual, so the blue bar is what we were budgeting for the current year to date through January of how much expenditures were going to be in each of those plans, and the green bar is what we're actually seeing in terms of expenditures, and the blue essentials plan is primarily what is driving our deficit for year to date through January.
So I know this was a question earlier, but what happened, right? When we look at these, we look at them, typically about 3 months after the year is closed out, so that all of the run-out claims and everything can be captured. We can get the data and we can evaluate it. And this is the plan performance, currently that we're looking at as well, right? And what we are able to see is that your increase in cost drivers are all across the board. All right, we're looking at every sector of where your medical plan is going to hit has an increase. So your medical claims as a whole increased 42.3%. All right, that includes your pharmacy claims, which went up 41.6%. All right. And then and this is on a per employee per month basis. So remember, it's not the total budget we're talking about in these segments. In the inpatient claimants, this is one of the places that is pushing. It was less utilizers, but more cost associated with it. So more people are having longer stays in a hospital setting, which is by far the most expensive thing that's going to happen to your plan. Additionally, from an outpatient claims perspective, this is where you're going to see a lot of your cancer drugs administered, okay, which doesn't run under your pharmacy claims, it runs under your outpatient claims because it runs in a medical setting. Also, just cancer services in general, those type of things that are happening in an outpatient setting went up as well. Professional claims. Now, this is a place that we can see increase, specifically with our HMO providers, because a professional claim is your primary care physician, your specialty care physician, and then things that are offered within those settings. Now, that's okay. We're all right with a professional setting increase that does go up, specifically with HMO plans, because we require people to go and see their PCP. All right, and that has, by all accounts, brought down claims because it means that people are establishing relationships with their doctors, they're adopting healthier lifestyles, and they're having earlier detection on items. And one of the problems with cancer, for instance, is late stage versus early stage cancer detection. Multiple large claimants that are in our plan right now are late stage breast cancer, which means that they could have potentially found with early mammograms and ultrasounds that they were not able to have before, or maybe they just didn't go and get those. So those are things that we're always trying to push from an adherence perspective. Are you utilizing your preventative services to get in front of your doctor more? But in general, those claims have increased. And then lastly, Karen mentioned it, it's our high cost claimant increases. And it's really our high cost claimant increases under that $550,000 threshold. It seems counterintuitive that a $4 million claimant is better for your plan than a $50,000 or multiple $50,000 hits that equal up to that same amount, but that's how it works because you're indemnified everything above that $550,000 rate. Now, at the end of the time, we do have to pay the piper, right? There will be reinsurers that do renegotiate those and look at those risks, but in general, you don't have any coverage between, you're paying for all of the claims up to $550. So if you have multiple $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 hits, that's really where you're seeing an increase in your claims, and that's what we've had this year. Unfortunately, it's just where they've sat, and now some may cross over that stop-loss threshold or reinsurance threshold, but most are sitting well under that, and it's just hitting the plan in an adverse way.
So what you're saying is that our catastrophic amount is not kicking in, and in this time frame, we're seeing a lot more of those under the threshold, and versus in the past when we've actually had it. That's why it's hurting so much.
Yes,
it's been a few of those that hit the threshold and go over.
Yes, this year for sure. I mean, I think last year we had a very large stop loss hit for one claimant that went over $4 million. And again, remember that's dollars that we recoup back from a reimbursement standpoint from our stop loss reinsurance, where most of these, specifically with a greater number of them happening in a year.
What was the catastrophe amount?
$550,000. And actuarially, that's where we would project you and put you all at, right? When we look at your overall budget, we take some assumptions and then put it there, and then we basically have a kind of a model that we would set for our individuals. Additionally, when we're evaluating those, and we do that on a yearly basis, it's the one thing that we take out on a yearly basis because it has to be. We have basically simulators that can help us understand how many and how often that you would run against your stop loss, and if it's in your value to be at the set IS, or what we would call individual stop loss number that you're at. Benchmarking. So when we're looking at you versus peer districts, we're looking at multiple different categories. The three colors that you see in front of you are the ISD contribution, so the district contribution that you all give, the employee average, so the average amount that an employee costs on all of your plans. So we average those out, and then the family average, so the average cost of the family, the dependent tier coverages that you have, or sorry, just the family coverages that you have. And we use that versus your peer districts to say, hey, where are we fitting within this market? So the first thing is we look at is the employee-only average, and obviously this is our most important piece, right? We do want to make sure that we're prioritizing our employees. You know, their families are absolutely important, and we value them completely. But as your employer, you know, our first and foremost job is to insure our employees. And in this case, you all are well above or you're well below the average. You definitely outpace many of your peers. As you can see, Cypress Fairbanks, for instance, is a huge outlier for you all. That's also an individual that is in TRS. Klein, Katy, those are at a much higher rate than you all. And then you all fit right in within the New Caney, Magnolia, Aldine area. The one outlier here is Humble. They are in a much different scenario in how they handle their benefits. So I think that you all are very competitive versus the market. Many districts that I work with utilize Conroe as a base level on what they are looking at as far as their contributions as well, specifically in the employee-only tier.
Which ones did you say were TRS, Sci-Fair, and which else?
Sci-Fair, I believe it's Klein, Magnolia, Spring Branch, and I can't remember
It'll be on the
Tomball.
next slide.
Yes, it's on the next
okay,
slide.
thank
Yes.
you.
Sorry.
Can you tell me how is Humble doing it? Because they are
Yeah, Humble,
substantially different.
we've had this conversation. Humble has a different funding mechanism altogether. They do utilize a different style of plan that leverages what we would call Medicare repricing. It offers some competitive savings, but it offers a lesser network specifically. And so while your plans from a cost perspective may be a little bit higher, we would say that they are far more competitive from that. And again, you know, some of these are just how they allot and they put their funding in, right? Like they would rather invest here than other places. It's not always a yin and a yang thing as far as how they're ending up so cheap, right? And we've seen many districts, while their stated contribution is X, go far beyond that because they're pulling from a general fund or other items, and they're purposely doing this. So.
Or perhaps their insurance is not the quality that we
Yes,
have, right?
yes, that is 100% a concern, right? When we went out to market multiple years ago, right, it's offered to be able to assume or to look at all of these different things, right? We're going to evaluate as your consultant different funding mechanisms or different mechanisms for cost savings. That could include a reference-based pricing plan, a narrower network plan, all of these things. But what you are giving in quality and representation is a huge deal and of value when we look at your plans.
I wonder if these same districts are also having the same problems that we're having.
Yes.
I mean, this is where we're at right now.
Yes.
But
Like I said, I represent many districts in the area, and they are all having very large funding deficit issues, right? And it all stems from, the base level fact is that if every year your trend is 7 to 10%, right, and you can't make changes to employee contributions because raises are an issue and their bottom line is an issue, and you can't make changes to your district contribution because you're at a funding deficit, right, then that interest compounds, and it compounds year over year. And if we don't make changes on a regular basis, whether that's to the plan or to programs alongside of it, or find more advantageous partnerships like we did with Blue Cross and Prime, then we're at a huge disadvantage, and many of these districts are dealing with that. So
I can see the funding issue. I have a quick question. Are they also having the experience in the high claimant category that we are?
No, not all districts are. Now, some are. In fact, I came from another district earlier this week that we had late last week that we had a strategy planning meeting with, and it was in the same vein. They had an increase in their high cost claimants under their individual stop loss deductible, but that's not a trend that's easily projected, right? And I don't think that that's just because of where we're at here.
So it's not necessarily something we're going to need to think about for the future. It's just kind of a fluke year.
As of right now, yes, correct. We would give a little bit of credence to it, but it's also something that we're trying to add, bring down the delta, because there is, multiple years of more advantageous experience that we feel is more indicative to how you'll run.
So are we attributing the past 3 to 4 years of lesser preventative visits, lesser screenings, maybe to the, contributing to the cause of the higher claims for this past year?
So I think that in general, over the course of the last few years, you've actually had an increase in your primary care visits, only attributed to the fact that you went from a non-health maintenance organization or HMO style plan that requires a PCP or a primary care provider to refer you out to a specialist. You went into that mechanism in 2022. So I would venture to say that more people have established a relationship with their doctor because of that. But there are certain items that were definitely indicative to say that people weren't getting the screenings that they needed. Specifically when we look at your four of your high cost claimants being breast cancers, and that size or the cost of which they are at the current point would indicate they are at a higher risk level or a stage 4.
Mm-hmm. And this doesn't include years 20 through 21, so.
No,
yeah,
when we do our trend level and actuarial assumptions, right, we utilize the most recent months that we can, right? In 2020 to 2024, the landscape has completely changed, right? And obviously we saw some different things in 2020 that we can attribute to, right? But what we can say based upon many studies now is that change in 2020 to 2021 and the lack of people going in is definitely to blame for a huge influx in claims in the last few years, specifically with regards to late stage cancers and things like that, because people were not going to their visits at all during COVID.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome. So additionally, we're looking at you all versus your peers from a family average perspective, and obviously, aside from a few, Fort Bend, Humble, and Spring Branch, you are well ahead of these other districts. Most TRS districts are not putting much money. Well, they have their general allotment, and that's all it's going to. And TRS rates are definitely higher on the family rates than our non-TRS districts are considered. Fort Bend is a great outlier, I think, in these areas, and I think that they would say that they recognize that. Additionally, here's your district contribution. You all are one of the highest in the area that you all are providing to your employees for your health plan. Here's a benchmarking, just a highlight of where you all are. Obviously, you all are very well aware of the students, and employee counts from all of these organizations. You can see what type of carrier they're with. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas is prevalent now. Now, obviously, they are the administrator for TRS. That could change in 2 years. They are going out to market this year for 2027. And then you have the typical players, Aetna and UHC, at multiple other organizations. Again, that outlier is Humble. They utilize Cigna and Allegiance, and like I said before, part of that is there is some reference-based conversations that exist in there that give them less favorable contracts. Also within those contracts, the Cigna and Allegiance contracts, we have had multiple districts come out of those because they were severely underfunded, and those are now turning around. So. And then this gives an idea of where you are from a medical plan perspective. You all fit right within the benchmark. I think 3 to 4 is definitely enough, because you want to give your employees choice, but not too much choice because it becomes overwhelming. Another district in the area had 7 plans, and they're looking to move because it was just overwhelmingly difficult to look at, and that doesn't include the largest district, which is HISD, that has so many plans and decisions that they're doing, and that had to have been compounded when you consider they just moved from Aetna to United Healthcare with even more plan options. So employees have a lot of parity, but at the same point, it's really difficult to make decisions, and when that happens, we find that people don't make the best decisions for themselves or their families.
So one of the things that we do every year, like Dr. Null said, is look at our plan compared to TRS. And if we were going to pick one of the TRS plans, or one of our plans to compare to TRS, it would be that Essentials plan, which is that broader network, which is very similar to the network that TRS provides to their employees. So TRS has two plans. They have a primary and a primary plus plan. They're structured the same, but their premiums are based on, one plan has lower premiums, but you pay a higher cost at the time of service, whereas the other plan has a higher premium, but you pay lower costs at the time of service. So when you look at our deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums for our Blue Essentials plan, we fall right in the middle of those two in terms of coverages. And then on the right-hand side, you can see how our premiums with that district contribution compare to the TRS Active Care premiums, including the state's contribution of $75. So across the board, we're very competitive in terms of TRS. Now their family coverage, like Derek alluded to, is much higher than what our employees are paying, and employee and spouse as well. So this is something that we're constantly looking at and evaluating. Now, movement in and out of the TRS plan has to be done well in advance of the plan year. If we were going to move to TRS, we'd have to make that decision before December of the year prior to the school year. So this is something that we're constantly evaluating, and like I said, our plan has always been better in terms of coverages, and like we said, we can customize our plan to fit the needs of the employees in our district. I think where our plan really shines is on the pharmacy side. We've got an example here. If you want to go to the next slide.
Really wanted
Yeah,
to use this
I know,
one.
it's fun. So the next slide shows our highest costing drugs in terms of utilization, and this is where our plan really shines. If you look at the Blue Premier and the Blue Essentials plan column, it says before deductible and after deductible. So on a drug like Mounjaro, which is a GLP-1 for diabetes, a participant in our plan that goes to fill a prescription for that drug would pay $260 before they meet their deductible, and after the deductible, it would cost them $60 a month. If they were on TRS Active Care Primary, they would be paying $1,024 a month for that prescription, and then $307 a month after their deductibles met. So this is where we really see the difference between plan coverages in our plan as compared to the TRS plan.
So this is the 25-26 plan budget that we alluded to from a projection standpoint. As you can see over there, our stated budget in 24 and 25 is $55 million or $55.7 million. We're projecting $65.7 million needed, which would be a budget deficit of $9.9 million. Now, the components of this item that you're going to see here at the top is right in the left-hand side is your set budget. This is, numbers. We're not applying anything else other than what we have from what you're going to take in from a district perspective and what the employees are going to pay there, and that's where we get our set budget. In the middle column is the reforecast, and like I said before, we're projecting you all out well before your plan year is happening. And so during the middle of the year or during in the course of the plan year, we need to reforecast you to understand, how has your projection changed, right? With 6 months of really poor trend, as we know we just had, that changes our budget assumptions, right? We can't project out a change in your trend if it goes up precipitously. So we have to reforecast it just like you would in any traditional setting, right? If you have offsetting budget things, too much money coming in, too little money coming in, you have to reforecast. The same thought process here. It doesn't change our costs, but it does give us an assumption on how we're going to end the year, which is how Karen is able to come up with a figure to know how much of the fund balance we think is going to get eaten up by the end of the year. Now, we apply 2 percentages of trend here. So here on the medical side, as you can see, we're applying 5%. Traditionally, we are posting 7% right now, but we have brought it down to 5% because we feel like that is more indicative of how you will run moving forward based upon actuarial assumptions and because of your poor performance in the last year, right? Like I said, we outpaced trend. That's not going to happen on average, so we're going to bring down our projected trend moving forward. Additionally, RX trend is going up at a higher rate. Traditionally, we are using 13% or 13.5%, and we brought it down to 10.8% for the very same reason. We're trying to be more conservative in our approach, but we do want to help give more credence to how we've run previously. All of the other items that you see there are medical costs and pharmacy costs, is how we think you are going to run based upon all of our assumptions. So once we take these items in, we reforecast them or we apply trend to them, that's where we think that you will run on a per employee per month basis, okay? Then we have what's called a rebate improvement. Every single year, because of the way that we negotiate our pharmacy contracts, we get better rebates. All right, those things will come up. All right, so not only from a pharmacy perspective, but additional rebate improvements from the plan in general. All right, and that's not just rebates, but also just how the plan designs are working, any things that we're changing. Right, those things are going to come into play and help you all. Again, it's all baseline assumptions that are built into it. When we take that employee, just from a claims value perspective, we assume at the end of 2026, or the plan year of 2026, they would cost $760 roughly per employee per month from a claims value. Then your fixed costs come in. And as Karen was mentioning, that's where that $6.9 million was coming from. As you can see, a percentage of that is coming from your administration cost, okay? That's administration costs is your pharmacy and your medical providers, okay? Those to negotiate the network and to administer all of our claims. From an individual stop loss and an aggregate stop loss perspective, those are the two reinsurance components that we were talking about before. Those are the numbers that we're seeing here. The one thing that, among all the other things that could change, because obviously claims aren't going to run exactly how we project, right? We're not wizards. We are, unless they like to think that they are from a claims perspective. But they are, while those claims can change, the stop loss will change, right? We do not get that renewal until at least 5 months before, and cannot get before the plan closing year, and cannot get competitive quotes without firm data through 4 months of prior to 4 months to the contract term. And that's just because of the risks that they're taking on. And so right now we project that increase that could come down, which could help our overall budget, but we can't wait any longer to set the budget. So obviously we have to put it in there with an assumption that of what we have. After we get through all of that, we get to the total gross cost. That's everything all included, is about $65.7 million is what we're projecting. Now again, we have not shown any contribution changes as of yet. We will in just a second, right? But as of right now, if we kept the contributions exactly the same, we would bring in the same $21.8 million, assuming no changes obviously to enrollment, things like that, which brings us to total to the district of about $43.8 million in cost, and that would be a net change to the budget of about $9.9 million, okay? And again, that last number, the claims, the changeover estimate, right? When we change a reforecast with all of the things that change, right? The big change is in this plan year, right? The next plan year, it's only going up by $2.3 million, right? That's trend and a little bit, right? What we're really changing from a budget perspective is, hey, all of those upswing and claims that are happening now, and we're basically trying to reforecast and solve for into the next year.
Why does your health savings account have an asterisk? What's that for? The HSA.
HSA seed?
Mm-hmm.
Great question. I don't remember because I don't see the bottom of it. My assumption is it was probably saying that we don't include it in the overall budget because of the compliance necessities of it. It can't be necessarily put into a projected budget because you all are giving it, and it is employee dollars that are going into it. That's what I believe that it would say, but I
We're not contributing to HSA. That's coming out of.
We are contributing to the HSA. As of
Okay.
right now, in the last year, we did add a contribution or a seed to the HSA of $500 for every single individual that is in the plan. We did that with a purpose of trying to get people more into an advantageous plan from an enrollment perspective and to save money. We did not see the migration that we were hoping for because of it.
So
but yes.
every employee gets a $500 seed on the HSA?
Yes,
per
correct.
year?
Yes.
If they're in the high deductible plan.
If they're in the high deductible health plan.
Which plan is that?
It is the HSA PPO choice plan, I believe is what it's labeled
So
as.
only that plan?
Only that plan, because that's the only plan that's eligible for a health savings account.
Okay.
But that didn't help us draw.
Nope.
Enough.
It did not.
The goal of that is to draw more employees to that plan because it performs well, but it didn't really pull
Yeah.
enough there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't enough for people to make that decision, and maybe, again, attributing factor, just as Karen talked about, if you're a diabetic and you go from a copay that's associated with your Mounjaro or Ozempic, and then you have to go and pick up $1,100 of a drug, until you hit your deductible. For most individuals, that's a huge change, and people just don't have that out-of-pocket dollars to be able to help them.
And another one of the reasons we provided that contribution last year is we did a plan year change on our high deductible plan. So they had a short plan year, and so in order to kind of get them through that transition, now all of our plan years align to our fiscal year, and so that HSA contribution kind of helped them get through that short plan year as well.
But are we continuing to do the 500?
We are not. That's
Okay,
one of the
what I
recommendations
thought
that
I
we're
heard
going to make for
annually,
next
so I
year.
just wanted to
Yes.
confirm.
And with that HSA seed, there was only 3 employers in the 3 school districts in the area offering an HSA seed. One of which, Fort Bend, ended theirs in 2024, and one of which is a very low amount from Aldine. So
And that's non-taxable money too, interest bearing. So
correct.
that's nice.
Yes. All right. So plan design changes for the year. So these are the options that we've discussed and had approved from your benefits committee. Many of the discussions have gone into that, and we're going to walk you through what we've proposed and how we've gotten to that, and what the impact is to the plan. So first, a couple plan design options that are an improvement to the plan, and these improvements to the plan do come with claim savings, most specifically because of the savings to the musculoskeletal population and claims that could happen to that. So on the left-hand side is Hinge Health, and Hinge Health is a virtual physical therapy app. All right, I can speak specifically to this because I've used Hinge Health, and it is you meet with a physical therapist. They decide your physical therapy over the video conference. You put that over there, and then every time, every virtual session, you have your phone up. It measures if you're moving, and then it gives you specific instructions on what exercises and things to do, and if there are other items that are related to it, like a band, for a resistance band, for instance, or things like that, they will send it to you as a part of their program. Now, there is savings associated with this because, one, you're taking away people from what could potentially be a physical therapy claim and moving it to a virtual physical therapist, which can save the plan money. But additionally, it gives people access to musculoskeletal help, and musculoskeletal problems are a large driver of claims, not only in your plan, but in many plans, right? Whether it's sitting ergonomically at your chair or lots of walking because you're at a huge campus, right? And you're having to go from one side to the other. There's lots of different things that could affect your teachers and people like that, where musculoskeletal has been on the rise for many of our districts.
So they're able to do this on their own time schedule,
Correct.
et cetera.
At any point.
So that's also savings for them as far as time off from work or time, and for us.
Yes, correct. These 2 programs are at a huge benefit to the employee, and are an easy add from an additional perspective. We're assuming about a $500,000 savings to the plan from Hinge Health, and that's on the low side assumptions, but we're trying to be conservative to not over apply. Based upon how many people will enroll and do that, and then also the cost associated to it to utilize. Arasti is an additional physical therapy organization. It is already currently in your plan, but this allows us more customization to offer this, and then provides a direct benefit within your plan to specifically go to Arasti. They are physical health and wellness coordinators. They do a fantastic job of connecting people and working with them on site, as well as having a virtual physical component, and it works in similar fashion to Hinge Health in that it's working specifically for your musculoskeletal group. So,
But But it gives you the option of in-person or virtual.
Correct, yes. And so we would imply both of these, so your plans would basically
Hinge is
both be
not.
enhanced, yes. So,
Correct.
what?
Hinge is not in person.
No, correct. Hinge is
It's,
fully
the
virtual, and
playlist,
Arasti
okay.
has a virtual and an in-person component.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry, back to
Yes.
we already have a Rosti, but you said that we would, in our plan, but that we could customize it. So is there an idea of what that could save us?
Yeah, so the savings associated with Arasti are about $125,000 is what we're attributing to the plan right now. And again, that's conservative, but it could potentially help us even more as we create an advantageous reason to go to Arasti, which we've seen, better outcomes, but also a lower costing than, some of these other providers in a physical therapy area. All right, additionally, enhancing and changing the formulary. All right, these are one of the decisions that that we look at on a regular basis. It is not always implemented because there are some disruptions to employees, specifically when it comes to their drugs. With this change to the Performance Select Drug List, there are a few items that are being excluded or being moved because of the availability of other drugs in that same category. So, a couple of the highlights are this: it excludes high-cost drugs with minimum value. It prioritizes low-cost generics or preferred brand medications. It reduces the overuse of less effective or expensive drugs, and it capitalizes on over-the-counter when therapeutic alternatives are available. Now, we do a full disruption analysis or formulary analysis when we saw this, and so we did see a change and a disruption to some employees, I think about 500 on the plan. But most of those disruptions, specifically with regards to this formulary disruption, came from very small or minimal changes. On here, we mentioned a few, but over-the-counter or generic equivalents that are available that weren't being utilized because they were utilizing a brand name drug. They can move to those with no disruption and no changes to their needs. Additionally, some are as simple as changing from a pill to a capsule or a capsule to a pill. The way and the mechanism that those pharmaceuticals are getting to those people can help that, right? And how those are created and changed and saved. So all of those encompassed, I think, what do we say?
260.
Yeah, we're projecting $260,000 in savings to move to a Performance Select Drug List. And again, when we provided all of this data to the Employee Benefits Committee, we walked through the disruption, we walked through the major drivers of this disruption and what could happen.
Just to make sure I understand, when you ran the analysis, you said it could affect 500 employees to switch that list of drugs?
Correct, yes. 500 employees have a drug that would be impacted by this. Now again, the change in a formulary never means that we're removing drugs from them. It means that we're changing what drugs are, that they would be pushed to. And in this regard, many of them were either on a brand name drug that had an over-counter or generic equivalent that could do the same thing, right? So it doesn't impact their day-to-day, it doesn't impact their coverage, right? But additionally, a lot of them were impacted by just the mechanism of which they receive their pharmaceutical, changing from a capsule that takes longer to make, costs them more, to a pill.
Okay, but of those 500, those were all able to have some other option that it didn't?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, we're not removing their ability to get the drugs that are not, or the type of drugs necessary. It's just the change in what drug that they would use to get to that outcome.
I have a question about it too. Is
Go ahead.
that a long list of drugs with minimum value, or is that a short list?
What's the number?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I think we have those numbers when we run the disruption. We have it, but yes, it's not over long from the less effective drugs that we're looking at. It's longer on the over-the-counter and generic opportunities that are available that aren't being utilized because somebody's using a brand name drug.
Was the committee given the list of the medications, and they're okay with the?
I don't think
Tiffany?
we have the list, no.
No, not the full list of medications, and nor would we give any specific personal information on like how many of these drugs were on it. They were provided the total amount of individuals that were impacted, and then the type of impacts that would happen to the plan. So what the data that we see, right? I'm not looking at a full list when we're evaluating this, right? More we are running an analysis to show the disruption, and we're showing numbers within a specific category, and that's what we showed to the committee.
But the committee was okay with this?
Yes, correct.
Another quick, oh, sorry, did you have one? I'm sorry. Okay, another question on that was, I know this is maybe one of those easy Foster crystal ball type things. I know you don't know who that is, but anyway, of those 500, is there any idea of, is there a reason why they were on the name brand, or is there a reason why they weren't doing one of these other options before? Is there any way of knowing that?
Not from the data that we get,
Okay.
right? There's no data collected at the pharmacy or the doctor's office that's integrated to tell us like why or that it was important, right? Or valuable. Now, what I can say is, oftentimes when these formulary changes do happen, if it is a medically necessary drug, there are ways to have an appeal process to get those drugs back on, right? And so if there is a specific or rare condition to where they can't have that, or they had an adverse reaction to the over-the-counter or generic medication, then there are appeals process to help them move forward and continue to have their drug on the formulary.
Thank you.
welcome.
That was just one of my concerns, because I know that this is out there like ADD medications.
Correct.
There are certain ones that different people can take that others cannot, and there may be an approved one, but one that's not, and so that was just a general example, but I was just wondering if that was going to be an option for them to appeal. Thank you.
All right, plan design options. On the left-hand side so each of these color-coded groups are our 3 plans that we currently have with Conroe ISD. Right? On the left-hand side is what is currently in place, and on the right-hand side is what is being proposed. Well, I'll start with the green first, because I think that's the simplest. So your Premier plan has run at a better fashion than your Essentials plan, and last year we made changes to the Premier plan to enhance it, to make it better. And the reason that we did that is so that people would make decisions to move to the Premier plan, which would help with our pricing, because the network is narrower, and so more likely to bring advantageous costs to the district. So we wanted to make the plan better to give people the opportunity to do that. We are not advocating any changes to that plan this year from the same position. If the more people that we move to it is a savings decrement, all right? We are able to save money by people choosing the Premier plan over the Essentials plan. Now I'll go back to the left. With the high deductible health plan does run fairly effectively, so we didn't want to change it too much, but we did need to make some changes because it did warrant it based upon the increase in costs on the yearly basis. Now, again, for a high deductible health plan, you as an individual have to meet your deductible before your benefits kick in. And then once your benefits kick in, then or once you've met your deductible, now you have co-insurance, and now you have percentages paid by your plan. The reason that high deductible health plans work is because what we would call they're consumer driven, because as an employee or an individual utilizing the plan, I'm more likely to make a decision that is better from a financial perspective when I have more skin in the game, right? If I'm on the high deductible health plan and I go to get an MRI, and that MRI is $1,500, I'm more likely to go and look for other MRI providers specifically that aren't in a facility that could cost me $500, right? So I'm more apt to have better utilization of the plan. Well, those costs did increase, so we're not advocating a change into the annual deductible where people will have their benefits kick in, but we are proposing a change to the out-of-pocket maximum. The out-of-pocket maximum is the max amount of money that you would spend on your plan. So after I've met my deductible, once I've met that deductible, I pay 30% of every bill. The plan pays 70% of every bill until I've paid 8.3, or what was $7,000 roughly. Okay, now that has changed, and we're proposing it move up to 8,360. Am I reading that correctly? Yes. Sorry, I'm squinting. 8,300. Yes, I'm squinting from over here, but yes, $8,300. This will not affect a majority of individuals on the plan, because most individuals will not utilize their entire out-of-pocket maximum. It will impact those that do have higher cost claims that will go up to the out-of-pocket maximum, because they will have to cover more costs for it. So it does affect individuals with higher bills and more medical costs. But again, there is a significant savings that comes from a change like that to help with the plan. And so when we're in a situation like we are, right, we evaluate how we can adjust the plan to potentially help us, and then we apply what is basically savings decrements that we would see. These are harder savings decrements because we can assume how many people are going to hit the plan, and then their additional cost of about $1,200. Additionally, the family amount does go up. These are also governed by the federal government on what the high deductible health plans can be to be a qualified high deductible health plan from a minimum value perspective, and to what people could contribute to an HSA, right? So they do have specific parameters on what you can and can't offer on a high deductible health plan, because you have access to put money into a high health savings account, and that's tax-free money. And when it becomes tax-free, they have questions.
Can you remind me one more time how many people are on this high deductible plan?
If you go back some slides, we've got.
Sorry, there's a lot of numbers. I think it's 1,100?
There we are.
1152.
1,100, yeah.
1,100. And the middle one, the essentials?
38.
38.
3,800.
Yes.
And what savings do we anticipate with this high deductible?
So altogether, we'll have that number right after what all of these are. So we bundled all of them together from a cost perspective. So additionally, on the HMO, on the Blue Essentials plan, obviously this is your largest network from a PPO provision. And remember, PPO means that I can go into a physician and I pay a copay. I don't pay the full cost. Same thought process with my pharmaceuticals. I pay a copay instead of the full cost of my pharmaceutical up to my deductible. So, am I running out? Is this better? Okay, so on the left-hand side, you can see our deductibles and where we're set at, and on the right-hand side in red is what we're proposing. So a change into the deductible to make it higher. Now again, remember, this is our highest costing plan. It does adversely affect how we run, and it has the most money running through it, obviously the most individuals that are in it as well. So this will make the greatest impact to the plan. Increasing the deductibles here to by $250 for an individual, or less than $2,000 for a family. Additionally, we are recommending a change to the specialist copay. Again, like I said before, we had a higher cost in the professional setting. So adding a little bit more money to a specialist visit, which can cost $300-400 a visit, as opposed to what could be $125 to $200 per for a primary care visit. Additionally, we're making a recommendation to move to co-insurance 25% instead of 20%, so moving it up 5%. The change to this to an employee is that I will pay 5% more in my bill once I hit my deductible. Okay. Now my out-of-pocket maximum remains the same. So technically, if I'm an employee that hits my out-of-pocket maximum, my costs have not increased or changed here, right? The employees that don't hit their out-of-pocket maximum, their costs have increased, right? So a very sick person would not see a change in their Blue Essentials plan, but potentially a person utilizing it on a regular basis to a little bit more than a regular basis would see an impact to their overall cost.
Is there a reason why you changed it just in the high deductible plan, but not the other two?
The out-of-pocket maximum?
Yes.
Yes, I mean a couple of reasons. One, from the high deductible health plan, you're spending a lot of money up front, right? And so from our actuarial tables and what we project, we associated a change in the out-of-pocket maximum to be more impactful to the plan, but also impact less people on that plan, right? In a better way to say that, a high deductible health plan, while it is not right for everybody, it can be right for certain individuals, specifically from a very low costing plan, right? And we wanted to keep you within benchmark with that, but we didn't want to adversely impact the employees utilizing it on the bottom side that are choosing it because it is the most affordable plan option for them, right? So let's just take, for instance, a janitor or something like that that doesn't, potentially doesn't have a ton of money to put into this, right? And so they're utilizing this plan as their lowest option to get into it, right? We didn't want to affect them onto their place where they could potentially get the money recouped back, right? We felt that it was better to impact less individuals within this plan on the out-of-pocket maximum, as opposed to the mass amount of people that are in the Blue Essentials plan. It felt proportionately correct to have a entry-level plan design change where more people are spending money here, more people are choosing this, right? Where we're going to recoup more money, but it also makes the plan more fiscally responsible because we're adding that to the first dollar parts of an individual to make different decisions potentially, right? So, hey, this plan costs us the most, so we have to change this the most. But we also want you to think, hey, maybe the Premier plan is more of an option for me where I get copays, but I will have to move to a different doctor. Or maybe the high deductible health plan is for me because I'll pay more I'll pay more out of pocket, but I'm not utilizing the plan, so why would I, right? Those are the type of decisions that we want to create in there.
Are they able to move plans? When are they eligible?
Only at annual enrollment, and that's governed by your Section 125. That allows for you to offer plans at a non-tax rate.
Are we changing anything on the cost of the telemedicine?
No.
Okay.
No, that is remaining the same. The last thing I didn't mention is in red at the very bottom is that HSA contribution. So we are moving that to zero. To Karen's point, part of that was in an effort to help employees choose that plan, but also because of the short plan year.
All right, so putting this all together, looking at the budget, our current funding level is at 55.7 million. And then based on the projections that Gallagher did for us through the end of 2026, projected cost at 65.7, that $9.9 million deficit. The plan design changes that Derek talked us through, starting with the physical therapy additions and all of the formulary changes and the plan design changes, that saves the plan about $3.4 million. So taking those things into consideration, we're still looking at a deficit of $6.6 million. So now going on to premiums. Okay, this is employee contributions to the plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about premium history here. We've been very fortunate that our employees have not had to incur any increase in premiums over the last 4 years, which is very unusual in the healthcare market. So while we're happy that we were able to provide that leveled premium, and even in some cases a reduction in premium from 22 to 23, our employees have enjoyed static premiums for the last 4 years. And having said earlier, I know the timing of this is not great, but I just wanted to kind of give you a history of where premiums have been.
Can you go back even further than the last 4 years? So in the previous, say, 8 or 6 years before that, so 10 years
Sure,
past,
I mean, we have
switched
that information,
typically
yes.
on average, every year the premiums increased, or was that not the
It
case?
just depends on what's happening and if we're changing third-party administrators, and there were some years they increased, but...
Yeah, I remember my husband's changing more frequently than that when he was still in the district, so...
Yes.
The 4 year is a bit odd.
Yes.
Would you agree? You agree?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah. And then in addition to the fact that premiums have not increased over the last 4 years, last year we actually made some plan design enhancements that made better benefits in that narrow plan. We decreased the copay and decreased the deductibles for that plan. So in addition to premiums staying static, they also enjoyed richer plan benefits. This is the same information, just in a graph format to kind of show you that levelized premiums that our employees have had over the last 4 years. So here, remember we talked about 3.4 million in plan design changes left us with a deficit of 6.6 million. If we were to fully fund the plan, the remaining 6.6 million through employee contribution by an increase in premiums, this is what it would take. This is not a recommendation. I'm just showing this for illustration purposes. If we were to make up the $6.6 million just sheerly on increasing employee premiums to get the budget balanced, this is what the recommended increases would be. It's rough, right?
It's confusing because it shows red, because
Yeah.
you think it's a negative. But yes, it's rough.
So if we were to do that, that would generate additional premium contributions via employee premium increases of 6.3 million, so it would essentially balance the plan. This is the recommendation that we are going to bring to you at the April regular board meeting. We're kind of meeting at a halfway point here, right? So employees are going to contribute some of this, and what we're going to recommend is that we move $3.4 million of our fund balance from the general fund to help offset the remainder of the deficit for next year. Now, this 3.4 million we will have to deal with next year in terms of if the plan runs as projected. This is 3.4 million that we will have to work into next year's. When I say next year, I mean 26, 27. Either plan design changes, or if the plan runs more efficiently, we will adjust accordingly, but we didn't feel like it was fair to put all of this burden on the employees, so we will meet them halfway if you guys are amenable to it. And so we are recommending a 6% increase on the high deductible plan, and kind of stair-stepping this based on plan performance, right? That Blue Premier plan, while it's still performing well, just based on increased costs, we're recommending an 8% increase in premiums for that plan, and then that Essentials plan, which is the wide network where most of our employees are, an 18% increase. And hopefully, like we said, we will see some migration to those better performing plans based on premiums, and employees will make decisions based on that. But this is the recommendation that we will bring to you, and that was approved by the Employee Benefits Committee.
Ms. Garza?
Yes.
What happened to the 7.8 million in 2024? The fund balance,
So
does that just get rolled back into
We're going to use all of that this year.
So that
because,
gets rolled back in?
well, it'll be gone at the end of the year because we're going to spend more this year than we're actually bringing in terms of contributions.
In the previous year, same amount, 2023, we show
Yes.
a 7.8.
Yes.
I mean, we've
So the
stayed
plan
above
ran
6
pretty
million.
flat for a period of years.
What's an average jump? You said it hasn't changed in 4 years, but prior to that it has. What percentage is like an average
Well,
jump?
I will say this is higher than what we have typically seen. 6 to 8% is pretty normal. But the reason we chose to kind of target that Essentials plan was because that's where we're losing the most money. And if we can help to migrate some employees to these better performing plans based on premiums, then hopefully it will help the plan at the end of the day.
It's not like we're making money off this.
No.
It is what it is. It's what the costs are.
Right.
Right? I mean,
It is what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
you can't stop inflation and trend from a medical perspective. These organizations, facilities, nursing contracts are all coming up, renegotiated, and costing more money. Pharmaceuticals are costing more money on a regular basis, and all of those are being negotiated, but not at enough pace to keep up with what is basically a 9% inflation trend.
So would you say you're seeing this across the board? This is a drastic drop in balance. I think we're going to be in the negative versus
Yes, I mean
previous years.
for you, yes, for you all, yes. Again, if we just talk about trend over the course of what is roughly 4 years, right? If you say that we would have assumed you run even at 7%, let's be conservative, 7% every single year, right? We've compounded that year over year, and you didn't make a change, and we didn't drop our fund balance at all from multiple years. So we've done a good job of making planned decisions and negotiated decisions and everything like that that's helped us. And then we had a huge upswing that sucked out of that. But if you looked over the course of 4 years, you would say, hey, that's great. That's great performance. If we only increased it 2% every year, and we actually made changes to our budget and to our contributions, we probably wouldn't be in this position, right? But that's hard to do, especially in years that you're running really well and you're saying our fund balance isn't impacted at all, right?
Ms. Garza, I think it would help me just for the next meeting to see the full 10-year span of how the fund balance
Sure.
had been performing. Just
Sure.
And Ms. Garza, I'm sorry. And Ms. Garza, just so I'm clear, the 6%, 18%, and 8% increase, that's excluding the $3.4 million fund balance.
That is correct.
Contribution.
Yes.
That's substantial.
So if we put this all together, the plan design changes were worth $3.4 million in savings. These premium increases from employees will generate an additional $3.2 million in revenue for the plan, so that leaves us with a deficit of $3.4 million that we're recommending that we bring over from the general fund. And that's why we wanted to lead tonight's meeting with the budget discussion, to kind of show you where we were at with our fund balance in the general fund, to use some of that 18.1 million capacity that we have going into next year to help offset.
And we would need to pull 3.4 every year.
If we don't make any plan design changes. That's why I was saying this 3.4 million we'll need to deal with a year from now when we're looking at plan design changes for 26, 27. Because this is going to be, unless
Or premium increases.
Or premium increases, right.
Or hopefully medical bills less.
Right, that's true. Depending on how forecasting, yes.
I tend to be a half full girl.
Is this something realistically we're going to look at again a year from now to see where we're
Absolutely, we will. And depending on how our stop loss renewal comes in, if we save some money there, like Derek said, they're projecting an increase just based on trend. Well, we haven't gone through that process yet to negotiate the contract for that, so we could realize some savings there as well.
So the 18.1, that is over the 20%
Yes.
minimum that we need to have in
That
there.
is correct.
Okay. No, it's over the 20.
right, but it's slightly over. Oh, that's above? You're saying that 18 million above?
18 million
Yes,
above.
18 million
Yes.
above the
18 million
20%.
Yeah.
So 144.8 would be 20% of the budget as it
That-
stands right now. Now, keep in mind that doesn't include a raise, so
So it's a double whammy.
So, yeah. It's almost like we have it spent already.
Have we done an analysis on other districts where we compete as far as what their planned payments are?
Yes. So every year when we come to a strategy meeting, we look at it. So we delimit, obviously, the district names and information, and we put it out there by two values. So one, what you're paying total per employee per month, and then what the value of your plans are. And on a regular basis, Conroe is competing very well with the districts. Now again, this is districts that we have within our purview, right? I don't have the information on organizations that aren't my clients, right? So like Humble, for instance, is not my client unless you want to call them, and I'm happy to talk to them. Yeah. So when
Even
we
with this
do,
change, you think we're still
yes,
in the
from a
realm of-
value perspective, and again, that's where we look at benchmarking and we do these value calculations. You all are still well ahead of these things. And additionally, when we're comparing you versus TRS, you're still well above the value of TRS because we put a lot of value into those co-pays that are associated with your pharmacy plans where they lose a lot on their, on their set percentages.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
all right. So this is general fund impact based on the plan design recommending and the contribution from the general fund, $3.4 million transfer. If we choose to do nothing, make no plan design changes, make no premium increases for our employees, we would still have to move $10 million from the general fund because claims are going to come. Revenue's going to be what it is based on current premiums and current contributions. So, like I said at the beginning, this is, unfortunately, timing is not great, but this is something we have to deal with now. And like Ms. Odenweller said, maybe performance will be better next year, and we won't need to contribute the whole 3.4. But what I'll probably do is, if you approve the recommendation in April, and depending on how the rest of this plan year goes, I will bring a transfer to you at the August board meeting to move the 3.4 million to kind of get us set up for next year, and then depending on how the year goes, we can evaluate if more money is needed. Hopefully, we won't need more money, and this is assuming that we can make it through the rest of this year with the fund balance that we have. Because there have been years, 10, 12 years ago, where we were moving millions of dollars into the plan for a period of years consecutively.
When does the year technically end again?
August 31st.
August, okay.
Yes.
And that's not an uncommon
No.
practice amongst our peer
It is
districts,
not.
right? Like many of our peer districts annually move millions of dollars.
They choose to run
each
at a
summer.
deficit knowing at the end of the year they're going to have to contribute, which, in theory, they're not committing to a set contribution per employee per month. They're just dealing with it at the end of the year based on how the plan performs for the year.
But in the last 4 years, that hasn't been the trend.
That has not for us. no.
Not for Conroe, but yes, for others, for sure, that there have been fluctuations and changes. Within the last year, I think I've seen one district change their district contribution, and that was Pasadena. Aside from that, everybody has had different gen fund pools and things like that, to acceptably deal with
In the last 4 years?
Yes, yeah, and I would say, on average, a majority of the districts in the area are most likely running at a deficit to their plan because of the increased costs of their plan and the lack of growth in district contributions, which is a natural byproduct of how we have to sit within our industry.
Interesting. Thank
So.
you.
Anything else? Well,
Thank you for the thorough discussion.
and one that was done, so,
well.
it was so well done. Thank you very much. It was very easy, a lot of numbers, as Trustee May said earlier, and it made it very easy to follow through, so.
Yeah. And I know it's not an easy conversation to have. 'Cause
No,
this
it's
is,
terrible.
This is not, but like I said, we've been fortunate that we have had the run we have, and now it's time to deal with it. And I will provide you with the 10-year fund balance history.
Yeah, I think that gives a little substance to
Sure.
that discussion, that part of the discussion. I appreciate that. Everything was great. Thank you. That is a lot of numbers. So any bit that you can add to it will help.
So any questions that you have between now and the board meeting, please reach out, because like I said, that night we'll need to take action on the plan design changes for next year. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Wes.
Okay, so just double checking myself here. I believe we are ready to move to executive session. The board will go into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071 for a private consultation with the board's attorney on any and all subjects or matters authorized by the law, and Section 551.074 to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, including but not limited to the dismissal of Michael Perry. Any action, vote, or decision of the board with regard to any matters discussed in closed session will be made when the board returns to open session. The time is 8:38. The time is 9:40 and we are back in session, and there's no action to be taken, and I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Done. We are adjourned.